On the night she became Ravenhawk's wife, Clara Whitmore learned that silence could be more terrifying than violence. The warrior who'd just claimed her as his bride sat motionless across the fire, watching her tremble, and did absolutely nothing. No demands, no force, no familiar brutality she'd spent 6 years learning to survive. Just patient, unbearable stillness. Her first husband had taught her that marriage meant enduring pain until dawn. But this gentle waiting felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, not knowing if she'd fall or fly. If you want to see how far this story reaches, hit that like button and comment your city below. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The wedding ceremony had lasted less than 20 minutes. Clara stood beside the fire circle in a dress that wasn't hers, surrounded by people whose language she barely understood, and promised herself to a man she'd known for exactly 16 days. The Lakota words felt strange in her mouth, shapes her tongue couldn't quite form, but Ravenhawk's grandmother, Winona, had made her practice them until they came out almost right. "Mitawa," Clara had whispered, her voice barely audible over the drum circle. "Mine." Ravenhawk had looked at her then, really looked at her, with those dark eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone, straight down to whatever broken thing lived in her chest. He'd said his own words in return, low and steady, and then it was done. She was married again, the second time in her life. The first had lasted 6 years, 4 months, and 13 days. She'd counted every single one. Now, as the celebration continued around them, children running between lodges, women singing songs Clara didn't know, men passing around something that smelled like fermented berries and made them laugh too loud. She felt the familiar tightness beginning in her chest, that old sensation of walls closing in, of air getting thin, of time running out before something inevitable happened. Ravenhawk touched her elbow, gentle as anything, and she flinched so hard she nearly dropped the wooden cup someone had pressed into her hands. "Sorry," she said automatically. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Don't," he said quietly. Just that one word. His hand had already moved away, giving her space she didn't ask for. "You don't apologize for that." But she did. She always did. Thomas had taught her that much, at least. Apologize first, explain later, and maybe it wouldn't be as bad. Winona appeared at her other side, smelling like sage smoke and something sweet Clara couldn't identify. The old woman's face was mapped with wrinkles, each one telling a story Clara would never know. And her hands were rough with decades of work Clara couldn't imagine. She said something in Lakota that sounded like a blessing, touched Clara's hair with surprising gentleness, and then moved away to join the other grandmothers near the largest fire. "She says your hair is like autumn grass," Ravenhawk translated, "that it will bring good fortune." Clara's hair was brown, plain, mouse brown, the kind of unremarkable color that disappeared in any crowd. Thomas used to say it made her look washed out, said she should do something with it, make herself presentable, try harder. But she'd stopped trying after the first year. Trying only seemed to make things worse. "That's kind of her," Clara managed. Ravenhawk didn't answer. He just stood there, solid and unmovable, while the celebration swirled around them like river water around stones. Someone started a new song, and several of the younger warriors began a dance Clara didn't recognize, all stomping feet and sharp movements that looked like they were fighting invisible enemies. She'd met Ravenhawk 16 days ago, when the wagon train she'd been traveling with had stumbled into this camp half-starved and desperate. They'd left Independence, Missouri, 3 months prior with 42 wagons and dreams of Oregon territory. They'd arrived here with 11 wagons, 63 people, and nothing that even resembled dreams anymore. The cholera had taken most of them. The rest had been picked off by weather, accidents, one attempted river crossing that went horribly wrong, and the slow, grinding realization that the West wasn't what the recruiters in Missouri had promised. It wasn't opportunity. It wasn't freedom. It was just hard, and then you died. Clara had buried her traveling companion, Margaret Sullivan, under a cottonwood tree about 40 miles back. Margaret had been 73 years old, tough as jerked meat, and the only person who'd never asked Clara why she was heading to Oregon alone. Why a 31-year-old school teacher with no family and no prospects was running toward the edge of the known world instead of settling somewhere sensible. Margaret had just patted her hand and said, We all got our reasons, honey. You'll tell me when you're ready. But Clara had never gotten ready, and now Margaret was under that cottonwood tree, and Clara was here, married to a Lakota warrior because the alternative had been starvation. That wasn't quite fair. Ravenhawk hadn't demanded marriage in exchange for helping the wagon train. He'd brought food regardless: dried buffalo meat, wild turnips, something that looked like berries but wasn't. And his people had shared their medicine when 2 more members of the wagon train started showing signs of fever. They'd even helped repair 3 of the wagons that were barely holding together. The marriage had been Clara's idea. Well, desperation's idea, technically. She'd approached him on the 10th day when it became clear that the wagon train couldn't continue and couldn't go back. When people started talking about splitting up, about trying to make it to Fort Laramie on foot, about 100 different plans that all ended the same way: death. Clara had watched the women of the camp, strong, capable, surviving, and made a decision. She'd found Ravenhawk near the horse corral and said, "I can teach. Reading, writing, arithmetic. I can cook, clean, sew. I'm healthy, I'm not afraid of work, and I won't cause trouble." He'd looked at her for a long moment, and she'd forced herself not to look away. Thomas had hated when she looked away. "You're proposing what, exactly?" Ravenhawk had asked. His English was better than her Lakota by miles, though he spoke with an accent that flattened some sounds and drew others out longer than they needed to be. "Marriage," she'd said flatly. "I need somewhere to go. You seem decent. It's a practical arrangement." Practical. Yes. "And what do I get from this arrangement?" She'd made herself list it, clinical and detached, like she was negotiating for vegetables at a market. "Someone to manage your household, someone who can read and write English, which seems useful given how many wagon trains are coming through. Someone who'll do what's expected." That last part had come out quieter than she intended. Won't cause trouble, won't complain, won't resist. She'd learned those lessons already. Ravenhawk had studied her with those 2 seeing eyes, and Clara had felt naked despite being fully clothed. Like he could see every bruise Thomas had ever left, even though they'd faded years ago. Like he could count all the ways she'd learned to make herself small and quiet and invisible. "I'll consider it," he'd finally said. 3 days later, he'd said yes. Not to her directly, to Winona, in a conversation Clara wasn't part of, but could hear happening in rapid Lakota near the cooking fires. Winona had laughed, actually laughed, and said something that made Ravenhawk's jaw tighten. Then the old woman had found Clara and started teaching her the words she'd need to know. Now here they were, married. Clara was trying very hard not to think about what came after the celebration ended. The dancing continued. Someone brought out a drum that sounded different from the others, deeper, and the rhythm changed into something that made Clara's chest feel strange. Not tight, something else, something that almost felt like music could live inside her bones if she let it. "You should eat," Ravenhawk said, nodding toward a group of women who were laying out food on blankets near the central fire. "Winona made wojapi. She doesn't make it for just anyone." "I'm not very hungry." "You haven't eaten since this morning. I watched." Of course he had. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture she couldn't quite stop. "I'll eat later." Clara. Just her name. That was all. But something in the way he said it made her look up at him, really look, for maybe the 3rd time since they'd met. He was tall. Taller than Thomas had been, broader through the shoulders, with long black hair he wore loose tonight instead of in the usual braids. His face was all angles and hard lines, except for his mouth, which was surprisingly full. He wore traditional clothing for the ceremony, buckskin painted with symbols Clara didn't understand, and he moved with the kind of easy confidence that came from never doubting your right to exist in the space you occupied. She hated him a little bit for that, for being so comfortable in his own skin. "I need you to understand something," he said quietly, pitched low enough that only she could hear. "I'm not going to hurt you." The words hit her like cold water. "I never said—" "You didn't have to." His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. "Fear has a smell. You've been wearing it since the moment you walked into this camp." Clara felt her face flush hot. "I'm not afraid of you." It was a lie. They both knew it. Ravenhawk didn't call her out, though. He just turned and started walking toward one of the lodges at the edge of the camp circle, a larger one, set slightly apart from the others. His lodge, Clara realized. Their lodge now. She followed because the alternative was standing alone while everyone watched. Inside it was warmer than she expected. A fire burned in the center, smoke rising through the opening at the top, and the space was bigger than it looked from outside. Sleeping furs were arranged on one side. Storage baskets lined another. Weapons hung on a rack, a bow, several knives, something that looked like a club but was probably called something else. Everything was organized, clean, purposeful. Clara stood just inside the entrance, not sure where to put herself. Ravenhawk moved around the space with easy familiarity, adding more wood to the fire, adjusting something on the weapon rack. Not rushing, not demanding anything, just existing. "Sit," he finally said, gesturing to the furs near the fire. She sat, knees together, hands folded, back straight. Perfect posture. Thomas had insisted on perfect posture. Ravenhawk settled across from her, close enough to talk comfortably, but far enough that she didn't feel cornered. He pulled a small bundle from one of the baskets and unwrapped it carefully. Dried meat, some kind of flatbread, berries. He arranged it on the cloth between them, and then just waited. "I told you I wasn't hungry," Clara said. "I know, but you need to eat anyway." He took a piece of the bread and ate it slowly, not watching her, but not watching her either. The wajapi is the berries mixed with fat and crushed seeds. Winona says it's good for settling nerves. "My nerves are fine." "Your hands are shaking." She looked down and saw that he was right. Her hands were trembling in her lap like they belonged to someone else. She pressed them flat against her thighs, forcing them still. The silence stretched out, broken only by the crackle of the fire and distant sounds of the celebration outside. Someone was singing now. A woman's voice rising and falling in a pattern that almost sounded like crying, except it was beautiful. "You can ask," Ravenhawk said eventually. "Whatever it is you're trying not to ask, just say it." Clara's throat felt tight. "What happens now?" "We eat, we talk, we sleep." "That's all?" He set down the piece of bread he'd been holding. "What else did you think would happen?" "Everything. Nothing. All the things Thomas had demanded on their wedding night, rough and graceless, while Clara had stared at the ceiling and counted the cracks in the plaster and waited for it to be over. All the nights after that, scattered across 6 years, when he'd reminded her that marriage meant certain obligations, and her feelings about those obligations were irrelevant. "I don't know," she said quietly. Ravenhawk studied her for a moment, and Clara forced herself not to look away, not to apologize, not to make herself smaller than she already felt. "Your first husband," he said. "He hurt you." It wasn't a question. Clara felt something in her chest crack open, just a little. "I never said I was married before." "You didn't have to. You carry it in how you move, how you hold yourself, how you expect pain before it comes." She wanted to deny it, wanted to say he was wrong, that he was seeing things that weren't there, that she was fine, but the words wouldn't come. They stuck in her throat like stones. "He's dead now," she heard herself say instead. "Died 3 years ago. Kicked by a horse." "Good." The single word, delivered with such flat certainty, shocked a laugh out of her. It came out wrong, too sharp, too bitter, but it was still a laugh. Ravenhawk's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Eat," he said again, pushing the cloth closer to her. "Then we'll talk about what happens next." Clara took a piece of the flatbread because it seemed easier than arguing. It was good, nutty, slightly sweet, with a texture that was both chewy and crispy somehow. She ate it slowly and then took a berry because Ravenhawk was watching, and it seemed important to him that she eat. The wajapi tasted like summer and something darker, richer, earth maybe, or time. "Better?" he asked. "It's good. Winona will be pleased. She thinks you're too skinny." "Winona has opinions about everything. She's earned them." He took another piece of bread, broke it in half, ate one piece, and set the other back on the cloth. "She was married 3 times. First husband died in a hunting accident. Second one got sick, consumption probably. Third one made it to 78 years old before his heart gave out." That's a long life. She says the trick is finding someone who doesn't make you want to die young. He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather, but Clara felt the weight of it anyway. Is that what you think we'll have? She asked. Someone who doesn't make you want to die young? I think we'll have what we make. He shifted, firelight catching the angles of his face. But I need you to understand something first. What happened before, with him, that's not what this is. You don't know what it was. I know enough. I know you proposed marriage to a stranger because you thought it was safer than staying with your own people. I know you flinch when anyone moves too fast near you. I know you apologize for existing. His voice stayed level, but something burned underneath it. I know what men do when they think their wives are property instead of people. Clara set down the berries she'd been holding. Her appetite had vanished again. It wasn't always bad. It was bad enough that you ran all the way to Oregon Territory to get away from the memory of it. I'm not running. She stopped. What was she doing? Starting over? Running towards something instead of away? She didn't even know anymore. Ravenhawk leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, hands loose, unthreatening. Listen to me. I'm not him. I won't touch you like he did. I won't demand things you can't give. And I sure as hell won't hurt you for saying no. Everyone says that at first. I'm not everyone. He held her gaze, steady and sure. You want to know what happens now? Here's what happens. We live in this lodge together. We share space. We figure out how to exist around each other. And nothing happens that you don't choose. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes and blinked them back furiously. That's not how marriage works. It's how this one does. You'll change your mind. Men always... I won't. You don't know that. You can't promise. Clara. He waited until she looked at him. I can promise. And I am. Right now. Whatever you think marriage means, whatever you learned before, forget it. This is different. She wanted to believe him. That was the worst part. She actually wanted to believe that this man she barely knew, who came from a completely different world, who had every right to expect the normal things husbands expected, would somehow be different, would somehow see her as something other than an obligation to be managed. I don't know how to do different, she whispered. Then we'll figure it out together. He sat back, giving her space again. But right now you need sleep. You've been running on fear and stubbornness for weeks, and it's catching up with you. He was right. Clara felt exhausted down to her bones, worn out from months of travel and weeks of terror, and one very long day of becoming someone's wife again. Ravenhawk stood and moved to the sleeping furs, rearranging them slightly. Clara's heart started hammering because this was it. This was the moment when his promises would dissolve and reality would set in, and he created 2 separate sleeping spaces, one on the left side of the lodge, one on the right, far enough apart that they wouldn't accidentally touch in the night. You take that side, he said, nodding to the left. I'll be over here. If you need anything in the night, just say. I'm a light sleeper. Clara stared at the separate furs, at the distance between them, at this man who'd just given her something she didn't know how to name. Why are you doing this? She asked. Ravenhawk paused, considering. My mother was married young to a man from another band. Good family, good connections, everything proper. He seemed kind at first. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He wasn't. She endured it for 3 years before she ran away in the middle of winter and nearly died getting back to her family. What happened to him? Her brothers dealt with him. He said it flatly, matter of fact. After that, she swore her sons would be different, that we'd understand what strength really meant. What does it mean? He looked at her directly. It means being strong enough to be gentle, strong enough to wait, strong enough to let someone else set the terms. Clara's throat ached. I'm not good at this, at talking, at trusting. I know, that's okay. What if I can't ever... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice all the ways she felt broken. Then we'll deal with that when we get there. If we get there. He moved toward his sleeping space, then paused. But Clara, you're not broken. You're just hurt. Those are different things. She didn't believe him, couldn't believe him, but some small, stubborn part of her wanted to. Clara stood on shaking legs and made her way to the furs he'd indicated. They were soft, softer than anything she'd slept on in months. She lay down fully clothed, pulling one of the furs over herself, and stared at the smoke hole above. Across the lodge, Ravenhawk settled into his own space. The fire burned between them, steady and warm. "Sleep," he said quietly. "I'll be right here." And somehow, impossibly, that's what she did. Clara woke once in the night, disoriented and panicked, her heart racing from a dream she couldn't quite remember. But before the panic could fully take hold, she heard Ravenhawk's voice in the darkness. "You're safe, just breathe." Not touching her, not moving toward her, just there. She breathed in and out, until her heart slowed and the panic receded and sleep pulled her back under. When she woke again, it was morning, and Ravenhawk was already up, building the fire back to life. He looked over when he heard her stirring and offered something that might have been a smile. "There's water in the basket by your head. Winona will bring food soon." Clara sat up slowly, her body stiff from travel and tension. "You stayed, on your side." "I said I would. All night. All night." He added more wood to the fire, patient and methodical. "And the next night. And the one after that. Until you say different." "What if I never say different?" He shrugged. "Then I'll learn to like sleeping alone." Clara pulled the fur around her shoulders and watched him work. He moved with the same easy confidence everything else, like he'd never doubted a decision in his life. She envied that, envied the certainty. "I don't understand you," she said. Ravenhawk looked up, flames reflecting in his dark eyes. "You don't have to. Not yet. Just trust that I mean what I say." "I don't know how to do that either." "Then we'll start smaller." He stood, brushing bark from his hands. "Do you trust that I won't hurt you today? Just today, not tomorrow or next week. Just the next few hours." Clara thought about it, really thought about it. This man had kept his word about everything so far, had given her space when she needed it, had created separate sleeping areas, had let her wake from nightmares without making demands or asking questions. "Yes," she said quietly, "I trust that. Today." "Good. That's enough for now." He moved toward the entrance. "I need to check on the horses. Take your time. Winona will be here soon, and she'll talk your ear off given half a chance." He left, letting the hide flap fall closed behind him, and Clara sat alone in the warm lodge, trying to figure out what she'd gotten herself into. The answer, she suspected, was something far more complicated than a simple marriage arrangement. Winona arrived 10 minutes later with food, opinions, and a seemingly endless supply of words in both Lakota and broken English. She bustled around the lodge like she owned it, rearranging things Clara hadn't touched, clicking her tongue at the separate sleeping areas, and finally settling next to Clara with a bowl of something that smelled like sage and meat. "Eat," she commanded. Clara ate. "Good girl, too skinny. Men like something to hold on to." "Winona, my grandson, he is patient, good man, strong." She tapped her temple. "Smart here, and here." She tapped her chest. "But you are scared rabbit, all jumping and running." "I'm not." "Shh. I am old. I know things." Winona fixed her with a look that seemed to see straight through to Clara's spine. "You think men are all same. Think marriage is cage. Your first man, he taught you wrong." Clara's hands tightened around the bowl. "How did you know about eyes tell everything? You have eyes that know pain." Winona patted her hand, surprisingly gentle. "But my Ravenhawk, he is not that. He will wait. He will be gentle. You will see. What if I can't be what he needs? Pah! He needs wife who is strong, who learns, who survives. You are here, yes? You survived wagon trail, cholera, death. You are strong enough." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to explain all the ways she felt weak and broken and wrong, but Winona was already moving on, talking about something else. Herbs for tea, how to repair buffalo hide, the best way to preserve meat for winter. It was overwhelming and oddly comforting at the same time. When Ravenhawk returned an hour later, Winona was still there, and Clara was learning how to say thank you in Lakota for the 5th time. "Pilamaya," Clara attempted. "Better," Winona crowed. "See, she learns. Smart woman." Ravenhawk caught Clara's eye, and something passed between them. Not quite a smile, not quite understanding, but something. A beginning, maybe. Winona eventually left, taking her opinions and her energy with her, and Clara was alone with her husband again. "How are you?" he asked. It was such a simple question, such a normal question, but no one had asked her that in so long that Clara didn't quite know how to answer. "Confused," she finally said. "Tired, scared, grateful, too many things at once." "That makes sense. It's been a lot of change very fast." "Do you regret it? Agreeing to this?" Ravenhawk considered the question seriously. "No. Do you?" "I don't know yet." "That's honest. I'll take it." He moved toward the baskets along the wall. "I need to go help with some repairs on the elder lodges. You're welcome to come, or you can stay here. Winona mentioned wanting to show you how the women prepare hides, but that can wait if you're not ready." The choice. Again, always giving her choices. "I'll stay here," Clara said, "if that's okay. It's your lodge now. You don't need permission to be in it." After he left, Clara sat in the quiet space and tried to figure out what to do with herself. Back in Pennsylvania, she'd had routines. School in the morning, preparing lessons in the afternoon, church on Sundays, sewing circle on Wednesdays. Her life had been small and confined and utterly predictable. Here, she had no idea what was expected of her. She spent the day exploring the lodge cautiously, like it might bite if she moved wrong. The storage baskets held dried food, tools, sewing supplies, medicine bundles that smelled like things she couldn't identify. Everything was organized, cared for, maintained, evidence of a life built with purpose. When Ravenhawk returned that evening, he found her attempting to repair a torn basket she'd discovered in the back. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I needed something to do with my hands." He nodded, understanding somehow. They ate together again, food Winona had sent over because apparently the old woman had decided Clara needed fattening up, and talked about small things. The weather, the horses, how the repairs had gone. Nothing deep, nothing threatening. When night came, they separated to their sleeping spaces again. But this time, before Ravenhawk settled in, he paused. "Clara?" She looked over. "You did good today. I know it doesn't feel like much, but you did good." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. That night she slept a little easier. And when she woke from another nightmare, this one about Thomas, about hands that hurt and words that cut, Ravenhawk was there again, his voice steady in the darkness. "Breathe. You're safe. I'm here." And slowly Clara started to believe that maybe, just maybe, he meant it. The fourth night, Clara woke up screaming. Not the quiet kind of panic she'd been having, the kind where she surfaced from nightmares gasping and disoriented but silent. This was different. This tore out of her throat like something with claws, ripping through the darkness and shattering the careful peace they'd been building. She was standing before she fully woke up, backing away from nothing, from everything, her hands up defensively like she could ward off ghosts. "Don't, please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Clara!" Ravenhawk's voice cut through the panic, sharp and clear. He was on his feet too, but keeping his distance, hands visible and open. "You're in the lodge. You're safe. It's just us." But she couldn't hear him yet. She was still trapped somewhere between sleep and memory, somewhere Thomas's hands were reaching for her and there was nowhere left to run. "I said I was sorry. I tried. I really tried. Clara, look at me." Ravenhawk moved slightly, putting himself in her line of sight without coming closer. "Look, it's me. It's Ravenhawk. You're in our lodge. That man, whoever you're seeing, he's not here." The words finally penetrated. Clara blinked, and the lodge came back into focus. The fire burning low. The familiar shapes of baskets and furs. Ravenhawk standing absolutely still, watching her with those dark eyes that saw too much. Her voice broke. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you." "Stop apologizing." He said it gently, but there was steel underneath. "You had a nightmare. That's not something you apologize for." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware that she was shaking badly enough that her teeth were chattering. The night air felt cold despite the fire, seeping through her thin nightdress and into her bones. Ravenhawk saw it. Of course he saw it. He moved slowly, telegraphing every motion, and retrieved one of the heavier furs from his sleeping area. He held it out to her, not coming closer, just offering. She took it with trembling hands and pulled it around her shoulders. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the fire. "I'll build it up." Clara sat because her legs weren't entirely steady. She watched him add wood to the fire with practiced efficiency, coaxing the flames higher until warmth started pushing back the cold. He filled a small pot with water from one of the storage containers and set it near the flames to heat. "Winona's calming tea," he explained. "Tastes like dirt, but it helps." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to." He settled across from her, close enough that she could feel the heat from the fire between them, but far enough that she didn't feel crowded. "You want to talk about it?" "No." "Okay." They sat in silence while the water heated. Clara pulled the fur tighter around herself and stared into the flames, trying to will her heartbeat back to normal, trying to push the nightmare back down into whatever dark corner of her mind it had crawled out of. "His name was Thomas Whitmore," she heard herself say. The words came out flat, detached, like she was reading from someone else's story. "We married when I was 25. He was 42. Everyone said I was lucky. School teacher, good family, stable position. Said I was getting too old to be particular." Ravenhawk didn't respond, just listened. "He seemed kind at first, said all the right things, brought me flowers, complimented my teaching, told my father he'd take good care of me." Clara laughed, but it came out wrong. "He did take care of me. Made sure I knew my place. Made sure I understood what happened to wives who didn't show proper gratitude." The water started to simmer. Ravenhawk added something from a leather pouch, dried leaves that smelled sharp and earthy, and let it steep. "It wasn't every day?" Clara continued. She didn't know why she was talking, why the words were spilling out after years of keeping them locked away. Maybe it was the darkness. Maybe it was the way Ravenhawk sat there without judgment, without pity, just solid presence. "Sometimes weeks would go by and he'd be fine, normal, almost the man I thought I'd married. Then something would set him off. Dinner wasn't ready on time. I looked at someone wrong. I breathed too loud. And he'd remind me that I belonged to him, that he had rights." "Rights," Ravenhawk repeated, and there was something dangerous in his voice. That's what he called it. His rights as a husband. His rights to my body, my time, my thoughts. Everything. Clara's hands tightened in the fur. "I tried leaving once. Made it as far as my sister's house in Pittsburgh. Thomas came and got me 3 days later. Told everyone I'd had a spell, that I wasn't well, that he was so worried about me. My sister believed him. My father believed him. Everyone believed him because he was so concerned, so devoted." She could still remember the ride back in the wagon, Thomas's hand crushing hers, his voice low and pleasant as he described exactly what would happen when they got home, how sorry she was going to be, how he'd make sure she never forgot who she belonged to. "When I got back, he locked me in the bedroom for a week. Said it was for my own good, that I clearly needed time to think about my choices." Clara's voice had gone completely flat now, empty of everything. "After that, I stopped trying. Just learned to be smaller, quieter, easier." Ravenhawk poured the tea into 2 wooden cups and pushed one toward her. "Drink." She drank. It did taste like dirt, but underneath was something almost sweet, and the warmth helped. 6 years, Clara said. 6 years of walking on eggshells, of trying to predict his moods, of making myself invisible. Then one day he went to check on a horse that had been acting strange, and it kicked him in the chest, broke his ribs, punctured his lung. He died 3 days later. "Good," Ravenhawk said again, just like he had the first time. Everyone at the funeral talked about what a tragedy it was, what a good man he'd been, how devoted he was to his poor wife who must be just devastated. Clara took another sip of the terrible tea. "I didn't cry, not once. I stood there in my black dress and felt nothing, just relief. That makes you human, not heartless." "Does it?" She looked at him finally, really looked at him. "Sometimes I dream he's still alive, that the funeral was a mistake, that he's coming back, that I'll have to go back to that house and that life, and—" Her voice cracked. She set down the teacup before she could drop it. "He's not," Ravenhawk said firmly. "He's dead. He can't touch you anymore. The only place he exists is in your memory, and even that, we can work on that. You can't fix what's broken. No, but you can learn to live with the cracks. He shifted slightly, firelight catching the angles of his face. My mother still dreams about her first husband sometimes. Wakes up afraid. It's been 20 years and she still carries it. But she also learned to trust my father, learned that not all men are the same. How long did that take? Does it matter? Clara pulled the fur closer around her shoulders. I suppose not. I don't know how to do this, how to be married again without waiting for it to go bad. Then don't think of it as marriage. Think of it as two people sharing space and figuring out how to coexist. Ravenhawk drained his teacup and set it aside. No expectations, no obligations, just seeing what happens. That's not very romantic. Romance is overrated. I'd rather have honest. Despite everything, Clara felt a small smile tug at her mouth. Winona would be disappointed. She keeps talking about grandchildren. Winona talks about a lot of things. Doesn't mean I have to listen to all of them. He stood, stretched, then grabbed another fur from his sleeping area. Come on. What? You're not going to sleep again tonight, not after that nightmare. I'm not either, now that I'm up. So we might as well do something useful. He headed toward the entrance of the lodge. Clara followed, curiosity overriding caution. Where are we going? You'll see. Outside, the camp was quiet. A few fires still burned low in front of lodges, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked once, then fell silent. The stars overhead were brighter than anything Clara had seen back east, scattered across the sky like someone had thrown diamonds against black velvet. Ravenhawk led her to the edge of camp, where the land sloped down toward a small stream. He spread the fur on the ground and sat, patting the space beside him. Clara sat, keeping a careful distance between them. Look up, he said. She did. The sky spread out above them, vast and impossible. More stars than she'd ever imagined existed. The Milky Way cut across it like a river of light. We call it the spirit path, Ravenhawk said quietly. The road souls travel when they leave this world. My mother used to bring me out here when I couldn't sleep as a child. She'd tell me stories about the stars, about how each one was a campfire where our ancestors gathered. That's beautiful. It's also practical. Hard to be afraid of the dark when you remember that your grandmother's grandmother is up there keeping watch. He pointed to a cluster of stars. That one. See how it looks like a hand? That's the hunter reaching for the buffalo. And there, that bright one near the horizon, that's the morning star. It rises just before dawn, reminds us that even the longest night ends. Clara stared at the stars and felt something in her chest loosen, just slightly. Thomas used to say that looking at stars was a waste of time, that practical people kept their eyes on the ground. Thomas sounds like he was an idiot as well as a bastard. The casual venom in Ravenhawk's voice surprised a real laugh out of Clara. Not the bitter, broken sound from earlier, an actual laugh that came from somewhere genuine. He was, she agreed, a complete idiot. I just couldn't see it for a long time. Fear makes us blind to a lot of things. They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the stars slowly wheel overhead. Clara felt the nightmare's grip loosening, reality settling back into place. Out here, under all this sky, Thomas seemed very small and very far away. Can I ask you something? She said eventually. Always. Why did you really say yes? To marrying me, I mean. It can't just be because you needed someone to manage your household. Half the women in this camp would probably marry you if you asked. Ravenhawk was quiet for a long moment. You're right. I could have married someone from the band, someone who knows our ways, who speaks our language, who wouldn't need everything explained. Then why didn't you? Because when you came to me with your proposal, you looked me in the eye and told me exactly what you thought you were worth. A cook, a cleaner, someone who wouldn't cause trouble. You'd made yourself so small that you thought that was enough. He turned to look at her. I said yes because I wanted to see what you'd look like when you remembered you were more than that. Clara's throat went tight. What if I can't remember? What if this is all that's left? It's not. I've seen glimpses already. He smiled slightly. Yesterday, when Winona was teaching you to say thank you for the fifth time, and you finally told her, very politely, that you'd gotten it already, and could you please learn something else? That was you, not the woman Thomas made. You. I did do that, didn't I? Clara felt a small flicker of something that might have been pride. You did. Winona was delighted, by the way. She told me later that you've got spine. You just forgot where you put it. She said that? More or less. She used more colorful language. Ravenhawk leaned back on his hands, looking up at the stars. Point is, you're already starting to find it again. Give it time. Time. Clara turned the word over in her mind. She'd spent 6 years in a prison of someone else's making, then 3 years running from the memory of it. Maybe time wasn't the enemy she'd thought it was. Maybe it was just time. Thank you, she said quietly. For this. For not making me explain, for not... Don't thank me for basic decency. That's just being human. You'd be surprised how uncommon that is. No, I wouldn't. His voice went hard. I've seen enough to know that cruelty is easy and kindness takes work. But that doesn't make kindness special. It just makes cruelty lazy. They stayed out there until the sky started to lighten in the east, the morning star blazing bright just above the horizon. Clara felt exhaustion pulling at her, but it was a different kind now. Not the desperate, fearful exhaustion of the past few days, but something cleaner, like she'd purged something poisonous and could finally rest. We should go back, Ravenhawk said. You need real sleep, not just nightmares. What if they come back? Then I'll be right there, like always. He stood and offered her a hand up. Clara looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. It was such a simple gesture, such a normal thing, but her heart was pounding like he'd asked her to jump off a cliff. It's just a hand, Ravenhawk said gently. No strings, no obligations, just help standing up. Clara took his hand. His palm was warm and calloused from work, his grip steady but not tight. He pulled her to her feet easily, then let go the moment she was stable. No lingering. No excuses to maintain contact. Just help, freely given and freely released. See, he said. Not so terrible. No, Clara admitted. Not terrible at all. They walked back to the lodge in the pre-dawn quiet, and when they settled back into their separate sleeping spaces, Clara found that sleep came easier than it had in days. When she woke later, much later, judging by the angle of sunlight coming through the smoke hole, Ravenhawk was already up and there was food waiting in a basket near her furs. A note was tucked beside it, written in careful English. Eat, then come find me at the horse corral if you want. Or don't, your choice. R.H. Clara ate the food, more of that nutty flatbread and some dried berries, and thought about choices, about how many she'd been given in the past few days, about how strange it felt to have someone keep offering them without resentment. She found him at the horse corral like the note said, working with a young mare that looked like she didn't want to be worked with. The horse kept shying away from the rope, ears pinned back, white showing around her eyes. What's wrong with her? Clara asked, leaning against the fence. Ravenhawk didn't turn around, his attention focused on the nervous mare. Previous owner beat her. We traded for her 2 weeks ago. She thinks everyone with a rope is going to hurt her. Can you fix that? Not fix, but maybe teach her different. He moved slowly, keeping his body language loose and unthreatening, letting the rope trail on the ground. She doesn't need to forget what happened. She just needs to learn that not everyone is the same. Clara watched him work with the mare for over an hour. He never raised his voice, never made a sudden movement, never showed frustration when the horse spooked and bolted to the far side of the corral. He just waited, patient and steady, until she stopped running and looked back at him. Then he'd start again. One small step at a time. Why don't you just tie her up and make her accept it? Clara asked. Wouldn't that be faster? Faster isn't always better. She's already been forced to obey, forced to submit, forced to accept pain. I do that again. I'm just proving her fear right. Ravenhawk extended his hand, palm up, letting the mare see it was empty. This way takes longer, but she learns to trust instead of just learning to endure. The mare took one hesitant step forward, then another. Her nostrils flared, testing the air, ears swiveling uncertainly. "Good girl," Ravenhawk murmured. "That's it. Nothing here to hurt you." The mare stretched out her neck, close enough now that she could have touched his hand if she wanted. Clara held her breath. The horse snorted and backed away again. Ravenhawk didn't chase her, just lowered his hand and waited. "Doesn't it frustrate you?" Clara asked. "All that work and she still won't trust?" She came closer than yesterday. That's progress. He glanced at Clara, and something in his expression was knowing. Healing isn't linear. Some days are better than others. You just keep showing up and proving you're safe. Clara realized he wasn't just talking about the horse anymore. Over the next week, a routine developed. Not imposed, not demanded. It just happened, shaped by proximity and necessity and the simple fact of two people learning to share space. Clara would wake up, eat whatever Winona had bullied Ravenhawk into setting out, then spend mornings with the other women. Winona had apparently decided that Clara needed to learn every practical skill immediately and had enlisted several other grandmothers in this mission. Clara learned to tan hides, a process that was harder and smellier than she'd imagined. She learned which plants were edible and which would make you sick. She learned to sew with sinew instead of thread, to start a fire without matches, to tell the weather by the way the wind smelled. The women didn't coddle her. When she did something wrong, they told her. When she did something right, they told her that too. It was strange, after years of Thomas's criticism disguised as concern, to receive correction that was just correction. No edge of cruelty underneath it, no implication that she was fundamentally broken. Afternoons, she usually found her way to the horse corral. She told herself it was just something to do, but really she was watching Ravenhawk work with the damaged mare. Watching the way he kept showing up, day after day, offering gentleness the horse wasn't ready to accept. It took 9 days before the mare let him touch her. Just a brief moment, his hand on her neck, the horse trembling but not bolting, before she danced away again. Clara saw Ravenhawk's expression then. Not triumph, just quiet satisfaction, like he'd known all along that patience would win. "You were right," she told him that evening over dinner. They'd started eating together, the food spread between them on the furs, conversation coming easier with each passing day. About healing not being linear, she trusted you for a second there. Second's a start. Tomorrow maybe it'll be 2 seconds, then 5, then a minute. He took a bite of the stew Winona had sent over. The woman seemed to think they'd starve without her intervention. "But yeah, she's getting there. Are you always this patient? With things that matter?" "Yeah." He looked at her directly. "Including you." Clara's heart did something complicated in her chest. "I'm trying to get better at this, at being here without waiting for everything to collapse." "I know you are. I see it." Ravenhawk set down his bowl. "You laughed at something Little Dove said today. Real laughter, not the polite kind. You didn't apologize once when Winona corrected your hide-scraping technique. You're sleeping through more nights than not." "You're keeping track?" "Of course I am. You're my wife." He said it matter-of-factly, like it was obvious. "I pay attention to how you're doing." Why does that word still make me nervous? Wife. Because the last time it meant someone had the right to hurt you. Give it time. Eventually it'll just mean partner. Someone who's on your side. Clara wanted to believe that. She was starting to believe it, actually, in small ways. In the way Ravenhawk kept his word about everything. In the way he never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel like she owed him anything for his patience. But believing and trusting were different things. And trust, that was still a bridge she was building one plank at a time. That night, as they settled into their separate sleeping spaces like they had every night since the wedding, Clara spoke into the darkness. "Ravenhawk?" "Yeah?" "When you were a child and couldn't sleep, and your mother brought you out to look at the stars, did it always work? Did it always make you feel better?" He was quiet for a moment. "Not always. Sometimes the fear was too big, and the stars were just stars. But she stayed with me anyway. Didn't tell me I was being foolish. Didn't tell me to get over it. Just stayed. That must have helped." It did. Knowing someone would stay even when I couldn't be brave, that mattered more than the stars. Clara heard him shift in his furs. "Is tonight one of those nights? When the stars wouldn't help?" "Maybe. I don't know. I just feel, Clara struggled to find the word, restless, like something's about to happen. Nothing's going to happen that you don't want to happen. Promise? I promise. Now try to sleep. Tomorrow Winona wants to teach you to make pemmican. And trust me, you'll need your energy for that argument. Clara smiled in the darkness. She's relentless. She's invested in you, means she likes you. She has a strange way of showing it. That's just how she is. You should have seen her with my father when he first started courting my mother. Gave him absolute hell for 6 months straight before deciding he was acceptable. What changed her mind? He kept showing up, even when she was difficult, even when she told him he wasn't good enough. He just kept proving that he wasn't going anywhere. Ravenhawk's voice was warm with memory. Turns out consistency matters more than grand gestures. Clara thought about that as she drifted off. About consistency. About showing up. About the difference between someone who promised to stay and someone who actually did it. She was starting to see that Ravenhawk was the second kind. 2 weeks after the wedding, Clara woke in the middle of the night and Ravenhawk wasn't in his sleeping space. Her heart lurched before she could stop it, old fear rising up. He'd left. He'd changed his mind. She'd done something wrong. He wasn't coming back. Then she heard voices outside. Low, urgent, concerned. Clara wrapped a fur around herself and stepped out of the lodge. Ravenhawk was standing with 2 other men, all of them looking toward the eastern edge of camp. She caught fragments of their conversation, something about scouts, warnings, riders in the distance. "What's wrong?" she asked. All 3 men turned. Ravenhawk's expression was tense in a way she hadn't seen before. "Go back inside, Clara." It was the first time he'd given her a direct order, and it made something cold settle in her stomach. "What's happening?" "Just, please, trust me on this. Go inside and stay there." One of the other men said something in Lakota, sharp and urgent. Ravenhawk responded in the same language, his tone brooking no argument. Clara went back inside the lodge, but she didn't lie down. She sat near the fire, fur pulled tight around her shoulders, and waited. When Ravenhawk finally came back an hour later, his face was grim. "Tell me," Clara said. He sat down across from her with a heavy sigh. "There's a cavalry unit moving this way. Not close yet, but close enough that the scouts spotted them. That's good, isn't it? They can help us get to Fort Laramie, or—" "Clara," he cut her off gently. "That's not how this works. Cavalry doesn't mean help, not for us." Reality settled over her like a weight. Of course. She'd been so focused on her own survival, her own small world within this camp, that she'd forgotten the larger context, the treaties that kept getting broken, the settlers pushing west, the violence that came when 2 worlds collided and one refused to make room for the other. What's going to happen? Probably nothing. They'll pass by, we'll avoid them, everything stays quiet. But we need to be ready to move the camp if necessary. His jaw tightened. "I wanted you to know in case things get complicated." "Complicated how?" "In case they see you, in case they think we're keeping you here against your will." He looked at her steadily. "In case you decide you'd rather go with them." Clara's breath caught. "You think I'd leave?" "I think you should know you have the option. If the cavalry comes and you want to go with them, I won't stop you. You're not a prisoner here." "I know that." "Do you?" Ravenhawk leaned forward slightly. "Because I need you to really know it. This, what we're building, it only works if you're choosing it. Not because you're trapped, not because you have nowhere else to go. Because you want to be here." Clara looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd given her nothing but patience, who'd slept on the other side of the lodge every night without complaint, who'd taught her about stars and horses and healing, who'd never once made her feel like she owed him anything. "I don't want to leave," she said quietly. "You might change your mind when—" "I won't," she said it firmly this time. "Ravenhawk, I've spent the last 3 years running, from Pennsylvania to Ohio to Missouri to the edge of the world. And you know what I found? You can run as far as you want, but you bring yourself with you. All your fear, all your damage, all your broken pieces, they come too." "Claire, so—" "Let me finish." She took a breath. "I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being afraid. And for the first time since Thomas died, I'm somewhere that doesn't feel like I'm just waiting for the next bad thing to happen. So no, I'm not leaving with the cavalry. I'm staying here, with you." The silence that followed was heavy with things neither of them knew how to say yet. Finally, Ravenhawk nodded. "Okay, but if you change your mind, I know, you'll let me go." Clara pulled the fur tighter around herself. "You've made that very clear. But you should also know, I'm starting to think that maybe, possibly, I might not want to go." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Might not want to? Baby steps. I'll take them." They sat together in the firelight, not touching, not talking, just being. And Clara realized that this quiet companionship, was its own kind of intimacy. Different from anything she'd known before, but no less real. The cavalry unit passed 2 days later without incident. The camp held its breath, scouts tracking their movement, everyone ready to run if necessary. But the soldiers kept moving west, following the river, and eventually disappeared over the horizon. The relief in camp was palpable, but Clara noticed that Ravenhawk stayed tense for days afterward, like he was waiting for the other boot to drop. "They'll be back," he told her one evening. "Maybe not those specific soldiers, but others like them. More settlers, more conflicts, more pressure to move off land we've been on for generations." "What will you do?" "What we always do. Adapt. Survive. Hold on to what we can for as long as we can." He looked at her. "Is that enough for you? Knowing that this life, it's not stable, not safe, not certain." Clara thought about what certainty had bought her before. A husband who hurt her, a life lived in fear, 6 years of pretending everything was fine while dying inside. "I've had certainty," she said. "I'll take your version instead." That night, something shifted between them. Clara couldn't name it exactly. They still slept in separate spaces, still maintained careful boundaries, but there was a new understanding underlying everything. A choice, made consciously and deliberately, to stay. It was 3 weeks after their wedding when Ravenhawk asked the question that would change everything. They were walking back from the stream where Clara had been learning to clean fish, another skill Winona insisted she needed, and the evening air was cool and pine-scented. "Clara," Ravenhawk said carefully, "can I try something? You can say no, but I'd like to try." Her heart picked up speed. "Try what?" He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I want to hold your hand. Just that. Nothing else. Just see if you can let someone touch you without it meaning something bad is coming." Claire's immediate instinct was to refuse, to make some excuse about needing both hands free, or her hands being dirty from the fish, or anything that would avoid the terrifying vulnerability of letting him that close. But she'd also been watching him work with the mare for weeks now, watching him offer gentleness over and over until the horse finally believed it. Maybe it was time to try believing it herself. "Okay," she whispered. Ravenhawk extended his hand, palm up, waiting. Not reaching for her, not taking, just offering. Clara looked at that outstretched hand and saw everything it represented. Trust, risk, the possibility that touch could mean something other than pain. She put her hand in his fingers closed around hers, warm, careful, present. Not gripping hard enough to trap her, but solid enough that she knew he was there. They stood like that in the fading light, hands joined, neither of them moving. Clara waited for the panic, for the flashback, for Thomas's voice in her head telling her what came next. But it didn't come. There was just Ravenhawk's hand holding hers, his thumb resting lightly against her wrist where her pulse hammered, his expression patient and open. "Okay?" he asked softly. "Yeah," Clara breathed. "Okay." They stood there for 5 minutes, then 10. Clara's breathing slowly steadied, her heart rate dropping toward normal. This was touch without threat, connection without control. Someone holding her hand because she'd said yes, and who would let go the moment she said stop. When they finally walked back to the lodge, their hands stayed linked the whole way. It was the smallest thing, the beginning of something that would take months to fully build, but it mattered. That night, Clara fell asleep with the memory of his hand in hers, and for once, she didn't dream of Thomas at all. Holding hands became something they did without talking about it first. Walking to the stream in the morning, Ravenhawk would extend his hand and Clara would take it. Sitting by the fire at night, their fingers would find each other in the space between them. Small moments of connection that Clara was learning didn't have to lead anywhere she wasn't ready to go. But her body still remembered things her mind wanted to forget. It happened on a Thursday, or what would have been Thursday if Clara was still keeping track of days the way she used to. Ravenhawk had been working on repairing a tear in the lodge covering, his hands moving with that steady competence she'd come to recognize in everything he did. Clara had been sorting through dried herbs Winona had brought over, trying to memorize which ones were for fever and which were for pain. He'd reached past her to grab something from one of the storage baskets, and his arm had brushed against her shoulder. Just a brief touch, completely accidental, not even skin to skin through their clothing. Clara flinched so hard she knocked over the basket of herbs. "Sorry," she said immediately, dropping to her knees to gather the scattered plants. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" Ravenhawk had frozen in place, his arms still extended toward the basket. "Don't apologize. That was my fault. I should have told you I was reaching." "No, it's fine. I'm just—" Clara's hands were shaking as she tried to pick up the herbs. Some of them had fallen into the fire pit's edge, mixing with ash, and she couldn't tell anymore which ones were which. Winona would be disappointed. She'd spent all morning explaining the differences, and now Clara had ruined it. "Clara," Ravenhawk's voice was gentle. "Look at me." She couldn't. She kept gathering herbs, her movements jerky and inefficient, trying to salvage what she could. If she just cleaned them off, sorted them properly, maybe Winona wouldn't notice. Maybe she could fix this before— "Clara, stop." Ravenhawk moved into her line of sight, crouching down but not touching her. "The herbs don't matter. Talk to me." "What just happened?" "Nothing. I'm fine." "You're shaking." "I said I'm fine." Her voice came out sharper than she intended, edged with panic she couldn't quite control. Ravenhawk was quiet for a moment. Then he settled back on his heels, giving her space. "Okay, you're fine, but I'm going to sit right here until you actually are fine, not just saying it." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to insist that he was being ridiculous, that she was overreacting to nothing, but her throat was too tight, and her hands wouldn't stop trembling, and suddenly she couldn't catch her breath properly. "It's not you," she managed. "It's just, when you reached past me like that, for a second I thought—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "You thought I was going to hit you." Clara closed her eyes. "Yes, but I didn't." "I know that. I know you wouldn't, but my body, it doesn't know. It just remembers and reacts before my brain can catch up." Ravenhawk nodded slowly, like this made perfect sense to him. "The mare does the same thing. Someone moves too fast near her head and she bolts, even though no one here has ever struck her. Her body remembers what happened before." "I'm not a horse." "No, but trauma works the same way. It gets stored in your muscles, your nerves, your gut. You can know something up here." He tapped his temple. "And still react from here." He pressed a hand to his stomach. Clara finally looked at him. He was still crouched a few feet away, making no move to come closer, his expression patient and calm. Not judging her, not frustrated by her broken responses. Just there. "How do you know so much about this?" she asked. "My mother and my sister." His jaw tightened slightly. "After my mother came back from her first husband, it took her years before she could be in a room with a man without positioning herself near the exit. My sister, she was attacked by a drunk trader when she was 15. Fought him off, but it changed her. She'd flinch at loud voices, couldn't stand having anyone behind her. Still can't, actually." "What happened to the trader?" Something dark crossed Ravenhawk's face. "Her brothers dealt with it." Clara didn't ask for details. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Point is," Ravenhawk continued, "I grew up watching women I loved try to heal from things men had done to them. Learned that healing isn't straightforward. Some days are good. Some days the smallest thing triggers a memory, and you're right back where you started." "That sounds exhausting." "It is, for everyone involved." He shifted slightly. "But you know what I also learned? That patience matters more than progress. That showing up consistently matters more than grand gestures. And that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just not be the thing they're afraid of." Clara felt tears prickling behind her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "I hate this. I hate that he still has this much power over me, even though he's dead." "Then we take the power back," piece by piece. Ravenhawk gestured to the scattered herbs, starting with not worrying about this mess. Winona has more plants than she knows what to do with. This isn't a catastrophe, it's just an accident. She spent all morning teaching me, and she'll spend another morning teaching you again if needed. That's what she does. He stood slowly, telegraphing his movement. Now, are you actually fine, or do you need a minute? Clara took inventory of herself. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her breathing was almost normal. The panic had receded back to whatever corner it lived in, waiting for the next trigger. I'm actually fine now, she said. Or close enough. Good. Then let's clean this up together, and then I'm going to teach you something. Teach me what? A small smile tugged at his mouth. How to hit me. Clara stared at him. What? You heard me. I'm going to teach you how to defend yourself. Not that you'll need to, not with me, not here, but because I think you need to know that you can, that if someone does try to hurt you, you have options. I don't know. You don't have to know. That's why I'm teaching you. He started gathering the scattered herbs, working methodically. My sister made me teach her after what happened. Said she never wanted to feel that helpless again. It helped her, knowing she could fight back if she had to. Clara helped him clean up the mess, her mind turning over his offer. Part of her wanted to refuse. Learning to fight seemed like admitting that danger was always lurking, that she needed to stay on guard. But another part, smaller but growing stronger, wanted to know that she wasn't as powerless as Thomas had made her feel. Okay, she said quietly, teach me. They spent the next hour outside the lodge, away from curious eyes. Ravenhawk showed her basic things, how to make a proper fist without breaking her thumb, where the vulnerable spots on a person's body were, how to use her weight and momentum instead of just strength. Most men are going to be bigger than you, he explained, demonstrating a move in slow motion. So you don't try to overpower them. You go for the soft spots, eyes, throat, groin, and then you run. What if I freeze? What if I can't? Then you freeze and we deal with it. But at least you'll know what you could have done, which is better than not knowing at all. He stepped back, hands loose at his sides. Now try it. Pretend I'm threatening you. Show me what you'd do. Clara couldn't. She stood there, arms at her sides, feeling ridiculous and exposed. Can't do it? Ravenhawk asked. I know it's pretend, but my body still thinks, okay, different approach. He thought for a moment. What if instead of me being the threat, I'm teaching you what to do if you ever see someone else being threatened? Take the personal piece out of it. That helped. Claire could think about it analytically, like a problem to solve rather than a trauma to relive. She practiced the movement slowly, Ravenhawk correcting her form when needed, until muscle memory started to take over. Better, he said after she'd executed a decent throat strike in slow motion. Do it again, faster this time. She did. And again. And again, until her arms ached and sweat dampened her hairline despite the cool air. Good, Ravenhawk finally said. That's enough for today. You did well. Clara bent over, hands on her knees, catching her breath. I feel like I just fought a war. You kind of did, just a different kind. He handed her a water skin. We'll practice more tomorrow if you want. Build the skills slowly. Why are you doing all this? Clara straightened up, wiping sweat from her forehead. The patience, the teaching, the waiting. You could have married someone easier, someone who didn't come with all this. She gestured vaguely at herself. Damage. Ravenhawk took the water skin back and drank before answering. You want honesty? Always. Because damage doesn't mean broken. Because you're trying, which matters more than succeeding. And because, he paused, choosing his words carefully. I see who you're becoming when you're not afraid, and I want to know that person better. Clara's chest felt tight for entirely different reasons now. I don't know who that person is yet. Then we'll find out together. That night, after they'd eaten and the fire had burned down to coals, Ravenhawk brought out a small clay pot Clara hadn't seen before. It was carefully sealed with wax, painted with symbols she didn't recognize. What's that? She asked. Something my mother makes. Healing salve. He broke the wax seal and opened the pot, releasing a scent that was sharp and herbal with something sweet underneath. For bruises, aches, tension, She gave it to me when I told her I was getting married, said it might be useful. Clara eyed the pot suspiciously. Useful how? Your shoulders have been up around your ears for weeks. I can see the tension in how you hold yourself, how you move. He scooped out some of the salve onto his fingers. This helps, if you'll let me. Let you what? Put it on your shoulders, your neck, wherever you're holding stress. He held up his hands, showing her the salve. Just this, nothing else. You stay fully clothed, I keep my hands where you can see them, and the moment you want me to stop, I stop. No questions, no arguments. Clara's immediate reaction was to refuse. The idea of him touching her deliberately, even for something as innocent as applying medicine, made her stomach twist with anxiety. But she was also exhausted from carrying tension she couldn't release, and there was something about the way he offered, so careful, so clear about boundaries, that made her think maybe she could try. Okay, she whispered. But if I tell you to stop, I stop immediately. Promise. He gestured to the furs near the fire. Sit however you're comfortable. Back to me or facing me, doesn't matter. Clara sat facing the fire, her back to him. Somehow that felt safer. Not having to watch his hands approach, not having to see his face and try to read his intentions. She pulled her hair over one shoulder, exposing her neck. I'm going to start now, Ravenhawk said quietly. Just my hands on your shoulders. If anything feels wrong, say so. His hand settled on her shoulders over her dress, warm and steady. Clara tensed immediately, every muscle going rigid, her breath catching. Breathe, Ravenhawk murmured. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Nothing bad is happening. This is just touch. Just my hands. You're safe. Clara forced herself to breathe. Once, twice. Her heart was hammering hard enough that she was sure he could feel it, but he didn't comment. He just kept his hands still, letting her adjust to the weight and warmth of them. Okay? He asked after a minute. Okay? She managed. His thumbs began to move in small circles, working the salve into the fabric over her shoulders. The pressure was firm, but not harsh, deliberate, but not demanding. He found knots in her muscles Clara didn't even know were there, and worked them patiently, giving each one time to release before moving on. Tell me if I press too hard, he said. It's fine. It's... Clara's voice caught as he found a particularly tight spot along her shoulder blade. Actually, that hurts a little. Hurts a... His pressure lightened immediately. Better? Yes. He kept working, his movements methodical and unhurried. The salve smelled stronger now, filling the lodge with that sharp, sweet scent. Cedar, Clara thought. And something else. Sage, maybe. What's in this? She asked, needing something to focus on besides the sensation of his hands on her body. My mother's secret recipe. But I know it has arnica, sage, cedar oil, some other things she won't tell anyone. His hands moved to the base of her neck, thumbs pressing into muscles that had been clenched for what felt like years. She learned it from her grandmother, who learned it from hers. Women's knowledge passed down. Your mother sounds formidable. She is. You'd like her. She doesn't take nonsense from anyone, but she's patient with things that matter. His hand stilled for a moment. She'd like you too, I think. Would see the same thing I see. What's that? Someone who's stronger than she knows. Clara felt tears welling up and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry. She wouldn't fall apart just because someone was being kind, just because hands on her body felt gentle instead of rough, just because... A sob broke free before she could stop it. Ravenhawk's hands immediately lifted. Did I hurt you? I'm sorry, No. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together pieces that wanted to scatter. You didn't hurt me. That's the problem. You didn't hurt me, and I can't. Another sob, harder this time. And then another, and suddenly she was crying in a way she hadn't let herself cry in years. Not the silent tears she'd shed in the dark during her marriage, not the bitter, angry tears after Thomas died. These were something else entirely, deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere she'd locked away and forgotten about. She felt Ravenhawk move, heard him shifting position, and panic spiked through the grief. He was leaving, he was done with her mess, she'd finally pushed too far. But he didn't leave. He settled in front of her, close enough that she could see him through her tears, but not touching, and just stayed. "It's okay," he said quietly. "Let it out. All of it. I'm not going anywhere." "I'm sorry," Clara choked out between sobs. "I'm sorry. I don't know why." "Stop apologizing for feeling things. This is years' worth of pain coming out. Let it." So she did. Clara cried for the girl she'd been at 25 who'd thought Thomas's attention meant love. She cried for 6 years of walking on eggshells, of making herself small, of enduring things that should never have been endured. She cried for the 3 years after, when she'd run but couldn't escape what lived inside her own head. She cried for every moment she'd believed Thomas when he said she was the problem, that she was ungrateful, that she was lucky he put up with her. And Ravenhawk sat there through all of it, not trying to fix it, not telling her to calm down, not making it about his discomfort with her tears. Just present and steady, like he'd been from the beginning. Eventually the sobs subsided into hiccups, then quiet tears, then finally just shaky breathing. Clara felt wrung out, emptied, like someone had reached inside her chest and pulled out everything poisonous. "Better?" Ravenhawk asked gently. "I don't know. Different." Clara wiped at her face with her sleeve. "I feel like I just cracked open." "Maybe that's not a bad thing. Cracks let the light in." She looked at him then, really looked. His face was patient and calm, no judgment in his expression, no frustration at having to deal with her breakdown, just quiet acceptance of wherever she was in this moment. "Thank you," Clara whispered, "for staying. Where else would I go? You're my wife. When you hurt, I stay." "Thomas never—" She stopped, shook her head. "Thomas always left when I cried. Said it was manipulative, that I was trying to control him with tears. Eventually I learned not to cry at all." Ravenhawk's jaw tightened. "Then Thomas was even more of a fool than I thought. Tears aren't manipulation. They're just feelings trying to get out." Clara pulled her knees up to her chest, suddenly aware of how exposed she felt. She'd just fallen apart in front of this man, shown him the rawest parts of herself. Parts she'd kept hidden for years because showing them meant being weak, and being weak meant getting hurt. But Ravenhawk hadn't hurt her, hadn't used her vulnerability against her, hadn't done any of the things she'd learned to expect. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always." "Why aren't you touching me right now? I mean, you were with the salve, and then I started crying. Most people would try to comfort someone who's crying, put an arm around them or something. Do you want me to touch you right now?" Clara thought about it honestly. "No, I don't think so. I feel too raw." "Then that's why I'm not touching you. Because comfort isn't comfort if it makes the other person uncomfortable." He shifted slightly. "Besides, staying is its own kind of comfort. Sometimes that's all someone needs, to know they're not alone in it. You're different from anyone I've ever known." "Good different or bad different?" "I'm still figuring that out." Clara rested her chin on her knees, but leaning toward good. "I'll take it." They sat in the quiet for a while, the fire crackling softly between them. Clara's face felt swollen and her eyes burned from crying, but underneath the discomfort was something unexpected, a lightness, maybe. Like she'd been carrying a weight so long she'd forgotten it was there, and now it was gone. "The salve," she said eventually. "It actually helped. Before I started crying, my shoulders feel looser." "Want me to finish? Or is that too much right now?" Clara considered. Part of her wanted to retreat, to go back to her sleeping space and hide from how vulnerable she'd just been. But another part, the part that was learning to trust, wanted to keep trying. "Finish," she decided, "but maybe warn me before you start again?" "Of course." Ravenhawk moved back around behind her. "Starting now, hands on your shoulders." This time when his hands settled on her, Clara didn't tense quite as badly. She was still aware of them, hyper-aware actually, but the panic didn't spike the same way. Maybe because she'd already cracked open and survived it. Maybe because his hands had been there before and hadn't hurt her. He worked the rest of the salve into her shoulders and neck, his touch staying professional and careful. When he found the tight spots, he'd ask before applying more pressure. When she needed a break, he'd sense it somehow and pull back without her having to say anything. "Done," he finally said, wiping his hands on a cloth. How do you feel? Clara rolled her shoulders experimentally. The tension was still there. Years of damage couldn't be undone in one session, but it was noticeably less. Better, lighter, somehow. Good. We can do it again tomorrow if you want. Or not. Your choice. I think I want to. Clara turned to face him. Thank you. For the salve, for staying, for... She gestured helplessly. All of it. You don't have to thank me for basic decency, Clara. How many times do I have to say that? Probably a few hundred more before I believe it. He smiled slightly. Then I'll keep saying it. That night, Clara's sleep was deeper than it had been in weeks. She didn't dream of Thomas, didn't wake up panicking. She just slept, clean and empty. And when she woke the next morning, Ravenhawk was already up building the fire. Morning, he said when he saw her stirring. Morning. Clara sat up slowly, her body feeling strangely loose. I slept through the whole night. I know. I checked on you a few times, but you were out. You checked on me? Old habit. My mother used to have nightmares. My father would check on her through the night, make sure she was sleeping okay. He added wood to the fire carefully. Figured you might be the same. Clara should have felt intruded upon, maybe. But instead she felt cared for in a way she couldn't quite name. Did I seem okay? You seem peaceful. It was good to see. Over the next few days, they developed a new routine. In the evenings, after eating, Ravenhawk would bring out the salve, and Clara would let him work on her shoulders. Sometimes she'd cry during it. Not big breakdowns like that first night, but quiet tears that came and went like weather. He'd pause when she needed him to, continue when she was ready, and never made her feel like her emotions were too much. And slowly, incrementally, Clara's body started learning a new language. Touch didn't have to mean pain. Hands on her skin didn't have to mean something was about to hurt. Vulnerability didn't automatically lead to exploitation. Can I try something different tonight? Ravenhawk asked one evening about a week after they'd started. Clara's guard went up immediately. Different how? I want to work on your hands. The salve is good for all kinds of tension, and I've noticed you clench your fists a lot, even in your sleep sometimes. She looked down at her hands. He was right. Her fingers were curled slightly even now, like she was ready to defend against something. Okay, but show me first how you do it. Ravenhawk held out his own hand, palm up. Like this. I'd take your hand in mine, work the salve into your palm, your fingers, your wrist, all the small muscles that hold tension. If it feels wrong at any point, you say so. Clara extended her hand slowly. When their palms touched, she waited for the panic. But it didn't come quite as strongly this time. Maybe because she'd done this before. Held his hand while walking, let him help her up, those small moments of contact that hadn't led anywhere bad. His hands were warm and calloused from work, bigger than hers, rougher. He applied the salve with the same careful attention he'd used on her shoulders, working it into her palm with small, circular motions. This okay? He asked. Yes. He moved to her fingers one at a time, gently working the joints and tendons. It felt strange and intimate and not threatening all at once. Clara watched his hands work and realized something that made her chest tight. You have patient hands, she said quietly. Ravenhawk looked up at her. What do you mean? Thomas's hands, they were always rushed, grabbing, taking, demanding, like he was owed something and was tired of waiting for it. She looked down at their joined hands. Yours are different. They wait. They ask. They don't assume. That's because I don't think I'm owed anything. You're not something I own, Clara. You're someone I share space with. Big difference. I'm starting to understand that. She watched him work on her other hand now, the movements just as careful as before. It's strange learning that marriage can be something different than what I knew. What did you think marriage was? Clara considered the question. Obligation, duty, something you endured because that's what women did. You made your choice and lived with it, no matter how bad it got. And now? Now I think maybe it could be partnership. Two people choosing each other every day and building something together. She paused. Is that naive? No, that's exactly what it should be. He finished with her second hand and set it down gently. The choosing each other part, that's the important bit. Not the wedding, not the ceremony. The daily decision to stay and try. Clara flexed her fingers, feeling the looseness in joints that had been clenched for too long. I want to try something. What's that? She took a breath for courage. Can you touch my face? Not everywhere, just, I don't know. My cheek, maybe. I want to see if I can handle it. Ravenhawk's expression softened. You sure? No, but I want to try anyway. Okay, I'm going to put some salve on my fingers first. They're sticky from your hands. Then I'll touch your cheek, left side. You can watch my hand the whole time, and if you need me to stop, I'll tell you. Clara watched as he cleaned his hands, applied fresh salve, then slowly raised his right hand toward her face. She could see it coming, could track its approach, could stop it any time she wanted. She didn't stop it. His palm cupped her cheek, warm and solid and gentle. His thumb rested along her cheekbone, the salve cooling slightly against her skin. Clara's breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. Okay? Ravenhawk asked softly. Okay, she whispered. He stayed like that, just holding her face in his hand, not moving, not demanding, just present. Clara closed her eyes and focused on the sensation. Skin against skin, warmth, the faint scent of the salve, his thumb moving slightly, almost unconsciously, against her cheekbone. This was touch without violence, connection without control. Someone holding her gently because she'd asked, because she'd trusted him enough to try. When she opened her eyes again, Ravenhawk was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something tender and fierce at the same time. What? She asked. You're braver than you think you are. This doesn't feel brave. It feels terrifying. Bravery usually does. His thumb stroked along her cheek one more time, then he lowered his hand. You did good. Really good. Clara touched her own cheek where his hand had been, the skin still warm from contact. Something in her chest cracked open just a little bit more, letting in light she'd been blocking for years. Can we do that again sometime? She asked. The face-touching thing. Whenever you want, just ask. That night Clara fell asleep thinking about hands. Patient hands that waited instead of taking. Hands that held her face like she was something precious instead of something owned. Hands that were teaching her body a new language. One word, one touch, one moment at a time. And in the darkness across the lodge, Ravenhawk lay awake thinking about the woman who'd walked into his camp a month ago, scared, damaged, expecting the worst from everyone. Thinking about how she'd cried in his arms without being held, how she'd let him touch her face, how she was slowly, painfully, courageously learning to trust again. He'd meant what he said. She was braver than she knew, and he'd wait as long as it took for her to see it herself. The breakthrough with touching her face opened something between them that neither of them quite knew how to name. It wasn't romance exactly, too fragile and hard-won for that. But it was connection, deeper than Clara had thought herself capable of anymore. She started asking for it. Small things, incremental things. His hand on her shoulder while they talked. His fingers brushing hair back from her face when the wind blew it loose. Once, daringly, she'd asked him to hold her hand while she fell asleep, and he'd sat beside her sleeping space until her breathing evened out, then quietly returned to his own side of the lodge. You're getting braver, Winona observed one afternoon while teaching Clara to weave a basket. The old woman's eyes were sharp despite her age, missing nothing. You don't jump when my grandson walks behind you anymore. Clara focused on the reeds in her hands, trying to remember the pattern Winona had shown her. Over, under, pull tight. He's predictable. I know what to expect now. Pah! Not predictable. Consistent. Different thing. Winona adjusted Clara's grip on the reeds with surprising gentleness. Predictable is boring. Consistent is safety. You learn the difference. I suppose I am. Good. You need safety before you can have anything else. The old woman worked her own basket with practiced efficiency, her gnarled fingers moving faster than Clara's despite being 3 times her age. My grandson, he is patient man, but even patient men have limits. Clara's hands stilled. What do you mean? I mean he cares for you. More than you know, I think. And caring without being able to show it. That is hard for anyone. Winona tied off a section of her basket and started a new row. He waits because you need waiting, but don't wait so long you forget he is man, not saint. We're not. Clara stumbled over the words, her face heating. It's not like that between us. No? Then why you turn red when I mention it? Winona cackled, clearly delighted by Clara's discomfort. You think I don't see how you watch him when he works? How he watches you when you don't notice? Old eyes see many things young eyes miss. Winona, shh. I say my piece, then I am quiet. The old woman leaned closer, her expression turning serious. You were hurt before. Badly. This I know. But Ravenhawk is not the man who hurt you. And if you spend all your time protecting yourself from pain that already happened, you miss what is happening now. Clara set down her half-finished basket, no longer able to focus on the weaving. What if I can't be what he needs? What if I'm too broken to... Broken, always broken. Winona made a dismissive gesture. You are not pottery, girl. You don't crack and become useless. You are person. People heal, they change, they grow. Maybe not back to what they were, but into something new. Something new, Clara repeated quietly. Yes, something that knows pain but chooses joy anyway. Something that has been afraid but decides to be brave. Winona picked up Clara's basket and examined it critically. Like this. Your weaving is terrible because you are afraid to pull tight. You think if you don't commit to the pattern, you can always undo it. But baskets need tension to hold shape. You must commit to the weave, or it falls apart. The metaphor wasn't subtle, but it landed anyway. Clara took the basket back and started over, this time pulling the reeds tight the way Winona had shown her. Better, the old woman approved. Now you learn. That evening, Clara found Ravenhawk at the horse corral as usual. The damaged mare had made remarkable progress in the past weeks. She'd let him halter her now, would even follow him around the enclosure without balking. But there were still moments when something would trigger her memory, and she'd bolt to the far corner, trembling. She's getting better, Clara observed, leaning against the fence. Ravenhawk nodded, watching the mare with that patient focus he brought to everything. She is. 2 months ago, she wouldn't let anyone near her. Now look, she's actually curious. The mare had approached the fence where they stood, ears forward, nostrils flaring as she investigated their scent. What changed? Consistency. She learned that I show up every day and never hurt her. Eventually, that knowledge got louder than the fear. He extended his hand slowly, letting the mare sniff it. She stretched her neck out cautiously, lips barely brushing his palm before backing away. See? Progress. Clara watched the dance between man and horse, seeing patterns she recognized in her own healing, the approach and retreat, the testing of boundaries, the slow, painful process of learning that not all touch meant harm. Can I ask you something personal? She said. You can ask me anything. I might not answer, but you can ask. Have you, before me I mean, was there anyone else? Someone you cared about? Ravenhawk glanced at her, surprise flickering across his face. Why do you want to know? Because Winona said something today about you being patient, and I realized I don't actually know if this situation is... Clara fumbled for the right words. I don't know if you're waiting for me because you want to, or because you feel obligated. Because we're married and you're too decent to... Clara. He turned to face her fully, leaving the mare to her own devices. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. I married you knowing exactly what I was getting into, knowing you were scared, knowing you'd been hurt, knowing it might take months or years before you could trust me if you ever could at all. But why would you? Because the alternative was letting you go off with that wagon train and probably die somewhere between here and Oregon. Because when you stood in front of me and listed your qualifications like you were applying for a job, all I could think was that someone had taught you to measure your worth in what you could do for other people. His voice was quiet but intense. And because even scared and damaged and running from ghosts, you looked me in the eye and asked for what you needed. That took courage. Clara's throat felt tight. You didn't answer my question about whether there was someone before. There was. He leaned against the fence beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Her name was Red Bird. We were promised to each other when I was 19. She was beautiful, skilled, everything a wife should be according to tradition. What happened? She didn't want to be married to me. Wanted someone else, a warrior from another band. But her family had already agreed to the match with mine, and she felt trapped by obligation. He picked at a splinter in the fence rail. We tried for about 6 months. She was miserable the whole time, and I was miserable watching her be miserable. Finally, I went to the council and asked them to dissolve the marriage. Her family was furious, but she went to the man she actually wanted, and last I heard they have 3 children and are happy. You gave her up. I gave her freedom. There's a difference. He looked at Clara directly. I learned something from that experience. That obligation makes terrible foundation for anything real. That someone staying because they have to isn't the same as someone staying because they want to. Is that what you want from me? For me to want to stay? Eventually, yes, but not because you're afraid of the alternative. Not because you think you owe me something, because you actually want to build a life with me. He paused. And if you never get there, if the damage is too deep and you decide you'd rather leave, I'll help you go. I won't trap you the way Redbird was trapped. Clara absorbed this, something in her chest both tightening and loosening at the same time. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Doesn't mean it's easy, but the concept is simple. You stay if you want to stay. You go if you want to go. Everything else we figure out as we go along. The mare had approached again, close enough now that Clara could have reached out and touched her if she'd wanted to. The horse's dark eyes were fixed on them, wary but interested. She's braver than she was, Clara observed. So are you. Clara couldn't argue with that. A month ago, she'd been sleeping across the lodge from this man, terrified of every shadow. Now she stood beside him talking about choice and freedom, and whether she wanted to stay, and the fear was still there, but it wasn't everything anymore. I want to try something tonight, she said before she could lose her nerve. What's that? Moving my sleeping space, closer to yours. She rushed the words out before panic could shut her down. Not together, not the same space, but closer. So we're not on opposite sides of the lodge anymore. Ravenhawk went very still. You're sure? No, but I want to try anyway. If it doesn't work, I can move back, but I think I'm ready for less distance. Okay, we'll do it tonight, after dinner. You tell me where you want your furs, and that's where they'll go. That evening, after they'd eaten Winona's seemingly endless supply of food, Ravenhawk helped Clara move her sleeping space. She ended up placing it about 6 feet from his, close enough that they could talk quietly before sleep, far enough that she didn't feel crowded. Good? He asked after they'd arranged the furs. Clara looked at the new configuration. Her stomach was doing complicated things, anxiety mixing with something that might have been anticipation. I think so. Can we try it and see? Of course. They settled into their respective spaces as the fire burned down to coals. The lodge felt different somehow with less distance between them. More intimate. Clara could hear Ravenhawk breathing, could see his silhouette in the dim light. Clara? His voice came soft through the darkness. Yeah? I'm proud of you for trying this. Don't be proud yet. I might panic in an hour and move everything back. Even if you do, you still tried. That counts. He shifted in his furs. Now sleep. Tomorrow Winona wants to teach you to make soap, and you'll need your energy for that argument. Despite her nervousness, Clara smiled. She does like to argue. It's her favorite pastime. Clara closed her eyes and focused on breathing. In and out. In and out. The anxiety was there, but underneath it was something new, something that felt almost like safety. She slept through the night without nightmares for the first time since the wedding. Over the next 2 weeks, the distance between their sleeping spaces gradually decreased. 6 feet became 5. 5 became 4. Neither of them discussed it. Clara would just shift her furs a little closer each night, and Ravenhawk would accept the adjustment without comment. The touching also evolved. Clara started initiating it more often, testing her boundaries and finding them more flexible than she'd expected. She'd take his hand while they walked, rest her head against his shoulder when they sat by the fire. Once, in a moment of boldness that surprised them both, she'd asked him to hold her while she fell asleep. He'd wrapped his arms around her from behind, careful to keep his hands visible, and stayed until her breathing evened out. When she'd woken in the morning, he was back in his own space, but the warmth of being held had stayed with her all day. "You're different," Little Dove observed one afternoon. The young woman was Winona's granddaughter, close to Clara's age, and had been cautiously friendly since Clara's arrival. "Lighter somehow. Less like rabbit ready to run." Clara helped Little Dove pound dried meat into powder for pemmican. Her arms ached from the work, but it felt good to be useful. "I'm learning that not everything is dangerous. My uncle helps with that, I think. He is good man, patient." Little Dove grinned. "Also, grandmother says you stop looking at him like he might bite you. She is very pleased about this. Winona has opinions about everything." "Yes." "This is why we love her." Little Dove added fat to the meat powder, working it together with practiced hands. "Can I ask you something? About before you came here?" Clara tensed slightly but nodded. "You can ask." "Your first husband. He was not good man, yes? This is why you are so careful now." "Yes." Clara saw no point in lying. The whole camp probably knew some version of her story by now. "He was cruel, made me afraid of things I shouldn't have to be afraid of. And now my uncle helps you not be afraid." "He's trying, I'm trying." Clara pounded the meat harder than necessary, working out tension she didn't know she was carrying. "It's slow. Some days I think I'm getting better, and then something small will trigger a memory, and I'm right back where I started." "But you keep trying anyway. This is brave." "It doesn't feel brave. Bravery never does. It just feels like being afraid but doing the thing anyway." Little Dove shaped the pemmican into small cakes with efficient movements. "You know what I think? I think you and that damaged mare my uncle works with, you are same. Learning slowly that not all hands hurt. Learning to trust again." It was the same metaphor Ravenhawk had used, and Clara couldn't help but laugh. "Does everyone in this camp compare me to that horse?" "Only people who are paying attention." Little Dove smiled. "But it is good comparison, yes? The mare gets better every day. So do you." That night, Clara made a decision. She waited until after dinner, after Ravenhawk had cleaned up their bowls and rebuilt the fire for the night. Waited until they were settling into their sleeping spaces, now only 2 feet apart, close enough that she could have reached out and touched him. "Ravenhawk? Will you hold me tonight? Not just until I fall asleep, the whole night." He went still. "You sure?" "No, but I want to try. I think I need to know what it feels like to be held without waiting for something bad to happen. To sleep next to someone and wake up and they're still just there." "Okay." He sat up slowly. "How do you want to do this?" Clara's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Can I come to your space? I think that might be easier than having you in mine." "Of course." She gathered her courage and moved to his sleeping furs, settling onto them awkwardly. Ravenhawk lay down beside her, careful to keep space between them. "Now what?" Clara asked, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "Now you tell me how you want to be held. Back to me, facing me, my arm here or there, whatever feels safest." Clara thought about it. Facing him felt too vulnerable, like she'd have to watch his face and read his intentions all night. But back to him meant not being able to see what he was doing, which brought its own anxiety. "Can we try side by side first, just lying next to each other without touching, and then add the holding part once I adjust?" "Good plan." They lay there in the darkness, inches apart but not touching. Clara could feel the heat from his body, could hear him breathing. Her own breath was coming too fast, her heart racing with adrenaline her body couldn't quite shake. "Talk to me," Ravenhawk said quietly. "What are you feeling right now?" "Scared. Excited. Terrified I'm going to panic and ruin this." Clara stared at the ceiling of the lodge, at the smoke hole showing stars beyond. "My body remembers sharing a bed with a man. It remembers what that meant. And even though I know you're different, even though I trust you up here," she tapped her temple, "my body is still preparing for a fight." "Then we go slower. No holding tonight, just this. Lying next to each other, getting your body used to proximity without the threat. But I said I wanted. What you want and what you're ready for can be different things. There's no timeline here, Clara. No deadline you have to meet. His hand found hers in the space between them, fingers intertwining. This is enough for tonight. Tomorrow, maybe we try a little more. The relief was so intense it made Clara's eyes burn. You're not disappointed? In you? Never. In the bastard who made you so afraid that lying next to your own husband feels dangerous? Absolutely. But not in you. They fell asleep like that, hands linked, bodies separate. And when Clara woke in the early morning to find they'd shifted closer in sleep, her head tucked against his shoulder, his arm loose around her waist, she didn't panic. She just lay there, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, and let herself be held. When Ravenhawk woke a few minutes later, he started to move his arm away. Clara caught his hand and held it in place. Stay, she whispered. I want you to stay. So he did. They spent the next several nights like that, gradually building Clara's tolerance for closeness. She'd sleep in his arms, wake up without panicking, and each morning felt like a small victory. Her body was learning new patterns, new associations. Being held meant safety now. Waking up next to someone meant comfort, not danger. You look happy, Winona observed one morning, catching Clara smiling at nothing in particular, like Cat who found cream. Clara tried to school her expression into something more neutral, but it was too late. I slept well. I'm sure sleeping had much to do with that smile. The old woman's eyes twinkled with knowing mischief. My grandson also smiles more, walks lighter. This is good. Winona. I say nothing. I observe only. Winona handed Clara a basket of roots that needed cleaning. But I will say this. Whatever you two are doing, keep doing it. You both look less like wounded creatures now, more like people who remember how to be happy. That evening, as Clara and Ravenhawk sat by the fire after eating, she found herself studying him in a way she hadn't let herself before. Really looking at him, not just registering his presence. The strong line of his jaw, the way firelight caught in his dark eyes, the capable hands that had held her so carefully. What? He asked, noticing her stare. I'm trying to figure something out. Figure what out? Clara took a breath. When I married Thomas, I thought I knew what attraction was supposed to feel like. Butterflies, nervousness, that giddy feeling everyone talks about. But looking back, I think what I felt was just anxiety, fear disguised as excitement. And now? Now I'm learning there's a different kind of feeling. Not the dramatic sweep you off your feet thing, just wanting to be near someone, feeling calm when they're around instead of anxious, looking forward to seeing them. She met his eyes. I think I might be feeling that. About you. Ravenhawk's expression softened. Yeah? Yeah. Which is strange because I spent so many years thinking I was broken, that Thomas had damaged something in me that couldn't be fixed. But maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I just needed time to heal. You needed safety to heal. There's a difference. He shifted closer, near enough that their knees touched. And for what it's worth, I feel it too. The wanting to be near you, the looking forward to seeing you, all of it. Clara's heart did something complicated in her chest. Can I kiss you? The words were out before she could second-guess them. Ravenhawk went very still. You want to kiss me? He asked carefully. I think so. I want to try, at least. See if I can. Clara's hands were trembling slightly, but she pressed on. Is that okay? Can I try? Clara, you can do whatever you want. But are you sure? We don't have to rush into... I know we don't have to, but I want to. I want to know what it feels like to choose this, to be the one who decides what happens to my body. She leaned forward slightly. So can I? Kiss you? Yes. His voice had gone rough. Yes, you can kiss me. Clara closed the distance between them slowly, giving herself time to change her mind if the panic hit. But it didn't come. She pressed her lips to his, gentle and uncertain, and felt him hold absolutely still beneath her touch. It was nothing like kissing Thomas had been. There was no demand in it, No claim being staked, just her mouth against his, soft and tentative, learning the shape of something new. She pulled back after a few seconds, her heart racing, but not from fear. "Okay?" Ravenhawk asked quietly. "Okay. Good, actually." Clara touched her own lips, almost surprised. "Can I try again?" "As many times as you want." This time she lingered longer, letting herself explore. His lips were warm and gentle, responding to her kiss but not taking over, following her lead. When she pulled back again, she was breathless. "This is different," she said. "Different how?" "Different from before. When Thomas kissed me, it always felt like he was trying to prove something, like he was claiming territory." Clara rested her forehead against Ravenhawk's, their breath mingling in the small space between them. "This feels like a conversation, like we're both here, both present." "That's because we are both here. This isn't me taking something from you. It's you giving something, and me receiving it." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb stroking her cheekbone. "Big difference." Clara kissed him again, more confident this time, and then again. Each kiss teaching her something new about what intimacy could be when it wasn't twisted by power and fear. When they finally pulled apart for good, settling back into their separate spaces, Clara felt different, lighter, like she'd taken back a piece of herself she thought Thomas had stolen permanently. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For letting me lead, for not pushing, for being patient while I figured out what I wanted." "Clara, you don't thank someone for basic respect. How many times do I have to tell you that?" "At least 100 more, apparently." She smiled in the darkness. "I'm a slow learner." "No, you're just learning to trust again, and that's harder than any lesson Winona could teach you." That night, Clara slept in Ravenhawk's arms again, but this time when she settled against him, she turned to face him instead of away, let herself be held face to face, their bodies aligned, intimate in a way that would have terrified her weeks ago. "This okay?" she asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "More than okay." His arms tightened around her slightly. "Sleep. I'll be right here." And he was. When she woke from a brief nightmare around midnight, old fears that wouldn't quite let go, he was there, murmuring comfort into her hair until she relaxed again. When she woke again at dawn, he was still there, exactly as he'd promised. Clara lifted her head and found him already awake, watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning." He brushed hair back from her face. "How do you feel?" "Safe," Clara said, and realized it was true. "I feel safe." Feeling safe was one thing. Believing she deserved to feel safe was another entirely. The realization hit Clara 3 days after their first kiss, while she was helping little Dove prepare hides for winter clothing. Her hands worked the scraper automatically, muscles remembering the motion Winona had drilled into her, but her mind was somewhere else, circling around a thought she couldn't quite shake. "You're quiet today," little Dove observed. "Thinking about my uncle?" Clara felt her face heat. "Is it that obvious?" "You smile when you think no one is watching, and you touch your lips sometimes, like you are remembering something good." Little Dove grinned. "This is not subtle, Clara. I'm not very good at hiding things, apparently. Why would you hide happiness? This is a good thing, yes? You and Ravenhawk, you are finding your way together." Clara set down her scraper, flexing fingers that had started to cramp. "That's just it. I don't know if I know how to be happy without waiting for something to ruin it, like my brain keeps expecting the other boot to drop." "What is this boot dropping?" "It's an expression, means waiting for the bad thing to happen, the inevitable disaster." Clara picked up the scraper again, needing something to do with her hands. "I spent 6 years learning that good moments were just pauses before the next bad thing. That if Thomas was being kind, it meant he wanted something or was setting me up for worse later. I got so used to that pattern that now, when something is actually good, I don't trust it." Little Dove was quiet for a moment, her own hands never stopping their work. "My mother had a friend once, woman from another band who married a man who beat her. She ran away after many years, came to live with us. Safe, yes? No more beatings. But she would still flinch when someone raised their hand, even to wave. Would still apologize when she had done nothing wrong. Took her a long time to stop waiting for the beating that was not coming. Did she ever stop completely? I don't know. She moved on eventually, went to live with her sister's family in the north. But I remember my mother saying that some wounds take longer to heal than others, that the body remembers even after the mind tries to forget. Clara thought about that as she worked. Her body did remember, would probably always remember, in small ways. The flinch at unexpected movement, the tension that crept into her shoulders when voices got loud, the instinct to make herself small and quiet and invisible. But she was also learning new things, new responses, new associations. Touch meant comfort now, more often than it meant threat. Being held meant safety. Ravenhawk's voice meant steadiness instead of danger. Can I ask you something? Clara said after a while. Of course. Do you think people can really change, not surface things, but deep down, who they are at their core? Little Dove considered the question seriously. I think people are like rivers. The water is always moving, always different, but the riverbed stays mostly the same. You can change the direction, make it deeper or wider, but some things, the basic shape, that stays. So you're saying I'll always be this damaged person? No, I am saying you will always be person who survived damage. Different thing. Little Dove pointed her scraper at Clara for emphasis. Damage is what happened to you. Survival is what you did about it. One is shame, one is strength. You choose which one to carry. The words settled into Clara's chest like stones finding the bottom of a river. She'd spent so long thinking of herself as broken, damaged, ruined. But Little Dove was right. Survival was its own kind of strength. She'd endured 6 years of hell and 3 years of running and had somehow made it here, to this place where healing was actually possible. That had to count for something. That evening, Clara waited until she and Ravenhawk had finished eating before bringing it up. They were sitting close together now, his arm around her shoulders in a way that had become natural over the past week. Casual intimacy that she was learning to crave instead of fear. I need to tell you something, she said. His arm tightened slightly around her. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just honest. Clara turned to face him, pulling back enough to see his expression in the firelight. I'm scared that I'm going to mess this up, that I'm going to have a bad day or a nightmare or a panic attack and undo all the progress we've made, that I'll prove I'm too damaged to be a real wife to you. Ravenhawk's jaw tightened. First of all, you are a real wife. We're married. That's not conditional on you being perfectly healed or never having bad days. But second, progress isn't something you can undo. You can have setbacks, sure, but everything you've learned, every boundary you've pushed, every moment you've chosen trust over fear, that's still there. A bad day doesn't erase it. Clara felt tears threatening and blinked them back. How are you so patient with this? With me? Because I see what you're doing, even if you don't. You're not just healing from what happened to you, you're building something new. Teaching yourself that intimacy doesn't have to mean pain, that marriage can be partnership instead of prison. He cupped her face in both hands, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. That's not easy work, Clara, and I'm honored that you're doing it with me. I don't feel like I'm doing anything special. I feel like I'm stumbling around in the dark, trying not to fall apart. That's called courage. It just doesn't look like the stories make it sound. He kissed her forehead gently. Now tell me what brought this on. What happened today? Clara told him about her conversation with Little Dove, about the woman who'd escaped her abusive husband but couldn't escape the memory of his violence, about rivers and riverbeds and choosing which burdens to carry. She's right, you know, Ravenhawk said when Clara finished. You do get to choose. You can carry the shame of what was done to you, or you can carry the strength of having survived it. Both are heavy. But one makes you smaller and one makes you bigger. I want to choose strength. I just don't always know how. Then let me help you remember. He stood, pulling her up with him. Come on. I want to show you something. Show me what? It's dark out. Exactly. He grabbed a fur and led her outside to the same spot they'd gone that first night after her nightmare. The place where they'd watched stars and talked about morning stars and spirits traveling the road of light. The sky was clear tonight, vast and deep, scattered with more stars than seemed possible. Ravenhawk spread the fur on the ground, and they lay down together, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest. See that constellation there? He pointed to a cluster of stars Clara didn't recognize. We call it the woman who fell from the sky. The story goes that she lived in the sky world, but fell through a hole and landed here, on Turtle's back. She had nothing, no family, no tools, no knowledge of this world, just herself and her courage. What happened to her? She built a life, asked the animals for help, learned which plants were safe to eat, figured out how to make fire and shelter and clothing, and eventually she became the mother of the people, not because she was perfect or undamaged, but because she refused to let her fall define her. Clara felt the weight of the story settling over her. You're saying I'm like her, someone who fell from one world into another. I'm saying you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. You left everything you knew, your home, your language, your entire way of life, and came here with nothing but a broken heart and a desperate need for safety. And look at you now, learning our language, our customs, our ways, building relationships, healing. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. That's not weakness, Clara. That's survival turning into strength. She lay there, staring at the woman who fell from the sky, and felt something shift inside her chest. Maybe Little Dove was right. Maybe she did get to choose which story to tell about herself. Not the story of the broken woman who let a cruel man destroy her, but the story of the survivor who walked away and built something new. I want to try something, Clara said quietly. What's that? I want to make love to you. Actually make love, not just kissing and holding, the whole thing. She felt him tense beneath her. But I need it to be on my terms. I need to be able to stop if it gets to be too much. I need to know that you'll let me lead. Ravenhawk was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Are you sure? There's no rush, Clara. We can wait as long as you need. I know we can, but I don't want to wait anymore. I want to know what it feels like to choose this, to be with someone because I want them, not because I have to. She lifted her head to look at him. I want you, Ravenhawk. Not as an obligation or a duty. I just want you. His eyes reflected starlight, dark and deep. Then you can have me. Any way you want. Any time you want. We go at your pace, and we stop when you say stop. Promise? I promise. They went back to the lodge hand in hand, Clara's heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Inside, Ravenhawk rebuilt the fire while Clara tried to calm her racing thoughts. This was different from her wedding night, when she'd been braced for violation. Different from every night with Thomas, when intimacy had meant enduring something unpleasant until it was over. This was her choice, her decision, her terms. How do you want to do this? Ravenhawk asked gently. What would make you feel safest? Clara thought about it. Can we start slow? Just touching first, no clothes off yet. I want to get used to the idea before we jump into anything. Of course. He settled onto the furs, sitting cross-legged, and held out his hands. Come here. She came to him, settling into his lap, her legs wrapped around his waist. The position was intimate, but not threatening. She could see his face, could read his expressions, could pull back if she needed to. Okay? He asked. Okay. Clara took a shaky breath. Can you just hold me for a minute? Let me adjust? His arms came around her, solid and warm. She rested her forehead against his, breathing in the scent of him, smoke and sage and something uniquely his own. Her heart was still racing, but beneath the nervousness was something else. Want. Actual, genuine desire for this man who'd shown her nothing but patience. Better? He murmured. Getting there. She kissed him softly, testing. He responded but didn't take over, letting her set the pace. She kissed him again, deeper this time, her hands coming up to tangle in his long hair. They stayed like that for a while, just kissing, Clara's confidence growing with each passing minute. Her body was learning that this kind of intimacy didn't have to lead to pain, that wanting someone and being wanted back could be gentle and good. When she finally pulled back, breathless, Ravenhawk's eyes were dark with desire he was clearly keeping in check. Still okay? He asked, voice rough. More than okay. Can I? She fumbled with the ties on her dress, suddenly shy. Can you help me with this? You sure? I'm sure. He helped her out of her dress slowly, giving her time to change her mind at any moment. When she was bare except for her thin undergarment, she waited for the shame to hit, for the voice in her head that sounded like Thomas, telling her all the ways her body was wrong. But it didn't come. Ravenhawk looked at her like she was beautiful, like he was honored to be here, to see her, to touch her. "Your turn," she whispered. He stripped off his shirt and Clara let herself look. Really look. His chest was marked with old scars, hunting accidents probably, or battles she didn't know about. His arms were corded with muscle from years of hard work. He was beautiful in a way that was completely different from Thomas's soft, aging body. "Touch me," he said quietly. "Wherever you want. However you want." Clara ran her hands over his chest, learning the shape of him, the warmth of his skin, the way he shivered slightly when her fingers traced over sensitive spots. She kissed his shoulder, his collarbone, the hollow of his throat, taking her time, claiming him the way Thomas had claimed her, but with gentleness instead of force. "Clara." Her name came out like a prayer. "You're killing me here." "Good or bad killing?" "Very good. Too good." His hands settled on her hips, thumbs stroking small circles through the thin fabric. "Tell me what you want, what you need." "I need..." Clara struggled to find words for what she was feeling. "I need to know that I'm in control, that if I say stop, everything stops." "It will. I swear it will." She kissed him again, harder this time, her body pressing against his. The nervousness was still there, but underneath it was desire that felt clean and right. She wanted this, wanted him, not because she had to, but because she chose to. "I'm ready," she whispered against his mouth. "Show me. Teach me. Help me learn what this is supposed to feel like." What followed was nothing like Clara had known before. Ravenhawk moved with her, not against her, asked permission with his hands, his mouth, his body. When she tensed, he'd pause, waiting for her to relax before continuing. When she said something hurt, he'd stop immediately and adjust. When she finally told him yes, she was ready for everything. He entered her so carefully, so gently, that tears sprang to her eyes. "Okay," he breathed, holding absolutely still. "Yes. Oh, yes." And it was. It was okay. It was more than okay. There was no pain, no force, no demand, just connection. Just two people choosing each other. They moved together slowly, Clara setting the rhythm, Ravenhawk following her lead. And when pleasure built inside her, something she'd never experienced before, something she didn't even know was possible, she didn't have to hide it or suppress it or feel ashamed of it. She could just feel. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the furs, sweaty and breathless and completely content. Clara's head rested on Ravenhawk's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow back to normal. That was... She couldn't find words big enough. "Yeah," he agreed. "It really was." "Is it always like that, when it's right?" "I don't know. I've never had it be this right before." He stroked her hair absently. "But I think when two people actually care about each other, when they're both present and both choosing it, yeah, it can be like that." Clara closed her eyes, letting the truth of it settle into her bones. She'd spent so many years thinking she was broken, that intimacy would always mean pain, that her body was just something to be endured, not celebrated. But this, what she'd just experienced with Ravenhawk, this proved all of that wrong. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For waiting, for being patient, for teaching me that this could be good." She lifted her head to look at him. "For seeing me as more than my damage." "Clara, I've never seen you as damaged. Hurt, yes. Afraid, absolutely. But damage implies something that can't be fixed. You were never broken, you were just waiting for someone to treat you like you mattered." The tears came then, but they weren't sad tears. They were release, relief. Joy that felt too big for her body to contain. Ravenhawk held her through it, his hand steady on her back, murmuring soft words in Lakota that she didn't understand but felt anyway. When the tears finally stopped, Clara felt lighter than she had in years, maybe ever. "I love you," she said, surprising herself. She hadn't planned to say it, hadn't even realized she felt it until the words were out. But they were true. Completely, absolutely true. Ravenhawk went still. Say that again. I love you. I don't know when it happened, probably sometime between you holding my hand and teaching me to fight and showing me the stars. But it's true. I love you. His smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face. I love you too. Have for weeks, probably. But I was waiting for you to get there on your own time. Of course you were. Because you're impossibly patient. With things that matter, always. They made love again that night, slower this time, Claire's confidence growing with each touch. And when they finally fell asleep tangled together, she didn't have nightmares. She dreamed of stars and horses and a woman who fell from the sky and built a new world from nothing but courage. The next morning, Winona took one look at Clara and started cackling. About time, the old woman crowed. I was beginning to think my grandson had forgotten how things worked. Clara's face went hot. Winona! What? You think I don't know? You walk different, smile different, even sit different. Very obvious. Winona handed Clara a basket of vegetables that needed washing. This is good. You're happy. He is happy. Everyone is happy except maybe me, because now you will make babies and I will have to teach them everything. I don't think we're quite there yet. Pah! You will be. These things happen faster than you think. The old woman's expression softened slightly. But truly, child, it is good to see you like this. When you first came, you were like ghost. Present, but not really here. Now you are alive again. Clara thought about that as she washed vegetables. Winona was right. She did feel alive again, present in her own body in a way she hadn't been for years. The fear was still there, probably would always be there in some form, but it wasn't everything anymore. It was just one part of her, not the defining feature. Can I ask you something? Clara said after a while. You can ask. I might not answer, but you can ask. The woman who taught you about healing, your grandmother, did she ever talk about healing from things that aren't physical wounds? Winona was quiet for a moment, her hands never stopping their work. She talked about it all the time, said the wounds you cannot see are often the deepest, that they need patience and time and someone who knows how to sit with pain without trying to fix it too quickly. Did she have those wounds, the invisible kind? All women have them, child. We live in a world made by men, for men. We learn to carry wounds we didn't earn and heal ourselves in secret. Winona fixed Clara with a knowing look. But you are learning to heal in the open, with help, with love. This is a rare thing. Don't waste it. I won't, Clara promised. That afternoon she found Ravenhawk at the horse corral as usual. The mare, who Clara had started calling Spirit, though she'd never said it aloud, had made remarkable progress. She'd let Ravenhawk saddle her now, would even carry a rider for short distances before the old fear kicked in, and she'd bolt. She's almost there, Clara observed. Ravenhawk nodded, watching the horse with that patient focus. Another few weeks, maybe a month, and she'll be solid. Won't ever forget what happened to her, but she'll have learned that not all riders are cruel. Just like me, Clara said quietly. He looked at her then, really looked at her. Yeah, just like you. Clara climbed over the fence and approached the mare carefully, the way Ravenhawk had taught her. Spirit's ears swiveled nervously, but she didn't bolt. Clara extended her hand slowly, letting the horse sniff it. That's it, Ravenhawk murmured. Show her you're not a threat. Spirit's soft nose bumped against Clara's palm, lips exploring. Clara held very still, barely breathing, as the horse decided whether to trust her. And then, miracle of miracles, Spirit leaned into the touch, letting Clara stroke her neck. Look at that, Ravenhawk said softly. She trusts you. Maybe she recognizes a fellow survivor. Clara kept stroking the mare's neck, marveling at how far they'd both come. Two damaged creatures learning to trust again, finding their way back to wholeness one small step at a time. Later that night, as they lay together in the darkness, Clara asked the question that had been building in her mind all day. What happens now? I mean, we've done all this work, all this healing, but the world outside this camp, it's still complicated. There are still tensions with settlers, Still cavalry units passing through. Still a whole mess of problems we haven't dealt with. Ravenhawk was quiet for a moment. You're asking if this is sustainable, if what we've built here can survive contact with the real world. I guess I am. Honestly, I don't know. The world is changing fast, and not in ways that are good for my people. There might come a day when we have to move, when this camp isn't safe anymore, when everything we know gets turned upside down. He pulled her closer. But here's what I do know. Whatever comes, we face it together. You're not alone anymore. I'm not alone anymore. We're a team. A team, Clara repeated, testing the word. I like that. Me too. He kissed the top of her head. And Clara, even if everything else falls apart, what we've built between us, that's ours. No one can take that away. Not cavalry, not settlers, not the whole damn world changing around us. She believed him. That was the remarkable part. After everything she'd been through, all the reasons she had to be cynical and guarded, she actually believed that what they'd built together was strong enough to weather whatever came next. I want to meet your mother, Claire said suddenly. And your sister, your whole family. I want them to know that you didn't make a mistake when you married me. They already know that, but yes, we'll visit them. Maybe next month when the weather turns. You can show off all the skills Winona's been drilling into you. She's going to be insufferable when she finds out how much I've learned. She's already insufferable. This won't change much. They laughed together in the darkness, and Clara marveled at how easy it had become. The laughter, the touching, the planning for a future that included both of them. She'd spent so long thinking she didn't deserve happiness that actually having it felt almost surreal. But it was real. Ravenhawk was real. This life they were building was real. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara was excited about tomorrow instead of afraid of it. Over the next few weeks, Clara continued to settle into her new life. She became proficient at tanning hides, could make pemmican that Winona actually approved of, and had learned enough Lakota to follow most conversations. The women of the camp had fully accepted her as one of their own, and the children had stopped staring at her like she was a curiosity. She taught reading and writing to anyone who wanted to learn, using charcoal and scraps of hide since paper was precious and rare. 3 of the younger warriors had taken her up on the offer, seeing the practical value in being able to read English as more settlers pushed west. And every night, she fell asleep in Ravenhawk's arms, safe and wanted and home. One evening, about 2 months after their wedding, Clara was helping Little Dove prepare dinner when a commotion at the edge of camp caught their attention. Riders approaching, 4 of them, from the look of it. Clara's heart jumped into her throat, old fear rising up before she could stop it. Easy, Little Dove murmured. Probably just traders or messengers. This happens sometimes. But it wasn't traders. As the riders got closer, Clara recognized them from the wagon train. James Sullivan, Margaret's son, who'd taken over leading after his mother died. 2 others she didn't know well. And Sarah Miller, who'd been one of the few people to show Clara kindness on the journey. Clara Whitmore? James called out when he spotted her. Is that you? Clara stood slowly, aware of the entire camp watching. Ravenhawk materialized at her side, his presence steady and protective without being possessive. It's Clara now, she said clearly. Just Clara. Not Whitmore anymore. James dismounted, looking between her and Ravenhawk with obvious confusion. We came to check on you, make sure you were all right. Some of us felt bad about leaving you here. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I'm home. Sarah pushed forward, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. You're sure you're not being kept here against your will? Clara almost laughed at the absurdity of it. After everything she'd been through, after all the healing and growth and choosing, someone still thought she needed rescuing. I'm sure. I married Ravenhawk of my own free will. I chose to stay here, and I'm happier than I've ever been. She took Ravenhawk's hand, threading their fingers together. But thank you for checking. It's kind of you to care. James still looked uncertain. The wagon train made it to Fort Laramie. There's a settlement starting there, people building homes. If you wanted to come back with us, rejoin your own people. These are my people now, Clara said firmly. But I appreciate the offer, truly. The riders stayed long enough to share a meal and exchange news. The camp treated them with cautious hospitality, feeding them and offering water for their horses. Clara noticed how the women watched the strangers carefully, how the men positioned themselves protectively without being overtly hostile. Before they left, Sarah pulled Clara aside. "You look different," she observed. "Lighter, somehow. Like you finally put down something heavy." "I have. I put down the person I thought I had to be and picked up the person I actually am." Clara smiled. "Turns out they're very different people." "I'm glad for you, really glad." Sarah squeezed her hand. "But if you ever change your mind, if you ever need help, you send word to Fort Laramie. Ask for the Millers. We'll come." "Thank you, but I won't need it." After the riders left, Ravenhawk found Clara standing at the edge of camp, watching them disappear into the distance. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. "None. Not a single one." She turned to face him. "That life, the one they're offering, it's not mine anymore. Maybe it never was. This is where I belong." "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Clara wrapped her arms around him, pressing close. "You know what I realized today? I've been thinking of my life as before and after. Before Thomas, after Thomas. Before you, after you. But it's not really about that. It's about choosing. I chose to marry Thomas because I thought I should. I chose to leave because I had to survive. And I chose you because I wanted to. That's the difference." Ravenhawk held her tight, his chin resting on top of her head. "And I chose you for the same reason, because I wanted to. Because I saw someone worth fighting for, even if the fight was just giving you space to heal." "Was it worth it? The waiting, the patience, all of it?" "Every single second." He pulled back to look at her. "You know what Winona said to me this morning? She said you walk like someone who's found her place in the world. Said it's good to see." "Winona has opinions about everything." "Yeah, but she's usually right, and she's right about this." He kissed her softly. "You have found your place. We both have. Together." That night, as Clara lay in Ravenhawk's arms, listening to the sounds of the camp settling for sleep, she thought about all the roads that had led her here. The pain and fear and damage. The running and hiding and trying to outpace ghosts. The desperate proposal to a stranger because any future seemed better than the past she was fleeing. And somehow, impossibly, it had led to this. To safety. To healing. To love that was earned instead of demanded. Given instead of taken. She would probably always carry scars from what Thomas had done to her. The body's memory was long, and some wounds went deeper than others. There would be bad days ahead, moments when the old fear crept back in, when nightmares still came, when being touched felt threatening instead of safe. But she would also carry this. The memory of patient hands teaching her that touch could be gentle. The knowledge that she was strong enough to survive and brave enough to heal. The certainty that she deserved to be loved, not despite her damage, but including all of it. "Ravenhawk?" she whispered into the darkness. "Hmm?" "Thank you for being patient with me, for waiting while I found my way back to myself." "You don't have to thank me for that. It was the easiest thing I've ever done." His arms tightened around her. "Besides, you did all the hard work. I just showed up consistently and tried not to be an asshole." Clara laughed softly. "Well, you succeeded. You're definitely not an asshole." High praise. "I mean it. You could have demanded things from me. Could have used the marriage contract to justify taking what you wanted. A lot of men would have. Then a lot of men are idiots who don't understand that the best things in life are the ones freely given." He kissed her temple. "Now sleep. Tomorrow, Winona wants to teach you to make winter moccasins, and you'll need your strength for that particular battle." She's relentless. She cares. That's how she shows it. Clara drifted off with those words echoing in her mind. Care, shown through action, consistency instead of grand gestures, patience instead of pressure. These were the things that had saved her, that had taught her she was worth saving. And in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, that had taught her to be small and quiet and invisible, she'd found a person who saw her and thought she was worth waiting for. That was the real miracle. Not that she'd healed. Healing was just time and work and refusing to give up. The miracle was that someone had given her the space to do it, had believed she was worth the wait. In the morning, Clara woke to find sunlight streaming through the smoke hole and Ravenhawk already up, building the fire. He looked over when he heard her stirring and smiled, and Clara felt her heart expand with something too big to name. This was happiness. This was home. This was choosing life on her own terms and finding someone who wanted to build that life with her. She'd walked into this camp broken and afraid, expecting nothing and hoping for very little. And she'd found everything she didn't know she needed. "Morning," Ravenhawk said, holding out a hand to help her up. Clara took his hand, letting him pull her into his arms. "Morning. What's the plan for today?" "Winona has plans for you. I have work with the horses, but tonight—" He kissed her softly. "Tonight we're ours." Sounds perfect. And it was. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't and never would be. The world was still complicated and dangerous and uncertain. There were still tensions and fears and problems that didn't have easy solutions, but they had each other. They had built something real and strong and honest. They had learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about refusing to let it write the future. Clara had spent years believing that Thomas had broken something fundamental inside her, that she would never be whole again, never be able to trust or love or feel safe. But she'd been wrong. Thomas had hurt her, terribly and deeply. But he hadn't broken her. She'd broken herself free instead, and in doing so, she'd found out who she really was underneath all the fear and damage and pain. She was brave, she was strong, she was worthy of love, and she was home.